Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of World Politics on Pod and Roku TV. I'm in the car today. I apologize. I'm going to try to get online. I'm stuck in traffic. And I wanted to open up the show today just to, first of all, wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving in the United States as we begin the holiday pretty much tomorrow. And what I'll say today in my monologue, I'm looking at the road so I don't get in a car accident, is some of the headlines today in the news are Hamas is now, surprisingly enough, calling for possibly a ceasefire with some conditions attached. So we're going to talk about that. And while this war in Israel is going on, it's really taken eyes off of Ukraine. And there's some political analysts concerned that with the presidential race just around the corner, would a shift in Ukraine, aid to Ukraine, enable Russia to win the war? We have Adam Lamparello on today. We're going to get his insight on that. And meanwhile, the other thing globally is economics. In the United States, we're seeing a lot of COVID money still being spent. We're still sitting on $3 trillion, but interest rates are still rather high. And if interest rates continue where they are, go up a little bit, could the economy be headed into a recession? And could this enable Donald Trump to win a presidential election more easier than had it not been in a recession? Of course, 72% of Democrats today would ask Joe Biden to not run again, but the Democrats have no apparent unless they put Kamala Harris to the task. Finally, I'll say that we pray for the family of Jimmy Carter as Rosalind Carter will be laid to rest on Friday, the former First Lady at the president's side from his entire career, from a farmer to a Navy engineer and a captain of a Navy ship to a state senator, the governor of Georgia, and then the president of the United States. They've been married 60 years and are quite an American love story, so we know that their legacy will live on. At least President Carter is alive, closing in on 100. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to bring in our guests, Mark Lee, Kimberly Calhoun, Shaquille Latimer from Down Under, and of course the fiery Adam Lamparello, and I say that in a respectful way because it's always good to have him on the show. So Mark, I'm going to hand it over to you as I try to drive back in safety as I'm stuck in rush hour traffic.
I appreciate you. You forgot somebody.
Canada.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got Sasha from Canada, and I was going to
Oh, Sasha Starr. I'm sorry. I didn't see him. The infamous Sasha Starr, who will give us insight. So, guys, I gave a lot on the menu today. I'm going to have to leave in about 5 minutes. But, I mean, the elephant in the room is Israel, right? I mean, they've called for possibly a ceasefire. Hamas has called. I don't know whether this is smoke and mirrors, but I can tell you right now where I live in North Carolina, there is a lot of protests to end the war. And it's become a political landmine. In fact, I have to talk about it on PBS tomorrow about where the stance is on this war. So I'm going to begin with Adam Lamparello, just in terms of what you think about what's going on in the Middle East. Is there a way out? Is a ceasefire really going to happen, or is it just smoke and mirrors?
We still don't hear you, Adam, and everything. So hopefully Adam can get adjusted and all along those lines. Before I get to Shaquille, I was going to bring Jacoby in. He's with us as well. But one thing that I was curious about is there are some people that are in small towns, and I think you brought it up, Shaquille, that sometimes bring referendums out in this space and everything. And some people wonder, well, why do they even care and everything? Because even here in North Carolina, Carrboro, which is on the other side of Chapel Hill, did have a referendum in support of the Palestinian cause and all of those things. So what is your thoughts when these smaller communities, they don't have a large Palestinian community as far as I'm aware of, but they did pass a referendum, I think it was by a vote of 4-3, to support the Palestinian cause?
I don't think I've ever quite said why do they care. What I've asked is why people care to the degree that they're going to go out and protest as viciously and as violently as they have done. It doesn't make sense to me for people who are not from there to be so passionate about it. I mean, one of the things I'm a big supporter of is the Innocence Project in the United States and some of the issues to do with racial discrepancies in the judicial system in the US. But as passionate as I am, I'm not going to go and protest out the front of the Sydney or New South Wales Parliament, right? Because it wouldn't make any sense for me to ask Australia to as a country to criticise the US for that. That's what I'm saying with the Israel-Palestine conflict. Look, I think most people are very concerned about the potential loss of life of innocent people, right? I think we all care about that, no matter where that happens in the world. So when we are when we're seeing what I've talked about, when we're seeing in the West where, school kids are being told not to go to school because they go to Jewish schools, or not to wear their school uniforms or things like that, I don't think that we should actually accept that if we live here in the West. Right? We should be saying, look, we can disagree about lots of things. We can disagree about policy. You may even genuinely believe that Palestine has a legitimate claim to have more land and more sovereignty over their land. But to abuse Jewish people, many of whom were born in our countries, they're not really from there. That, to me, would be the same as if you abused me because of something that's happening in India. I don't know what's going on in India, or abusing Adam because of something that happened in Italy. Like, he doesn't know. I don't know, Adam, actually. I don't really know if you were born in America or not. But, what's the point of doing that? It doesn't make sense. And that's not the sort of countries that we're supposed to live in and where we're supposed to be. Later in the show, I will just very quickly say, because I think everyone should sit down for this, there is a topic I want to bring up, and I was actually about to say before you brought Jatovy up that I was hoping Jatovy would be on for to bring that topic up. So I'll bring that up a little bit later in the show, perhaps in the second half.
No problem. Hey, Kim, what is your thought? Because like I said, it is a small city. Everybody that's in Scarborough is a bedroom community. It's a very much of a bedroom community outside of Chapel Hill, and they did have that referendum, and they did pass it in that sense and everything. And some people would be like, there's not a large Palestinian community in that community, and I'm not even sure who initiated the referendum, but some people might be surprised. And it is known as like the Paris of the Triangle and everything. So it does have a reputation for being a liberal city and all in that space. But there might be some people that are shocked that they would be bringing this issue out to the floor when there are other things going on in that particular city or that particular county town.
If people need support of some kind or are feeling uncomfortable, I think we need to do what we can to make a community feel safe and comfortable. And I don't know a whole lot about it other than what you have shared with me. But I believe in this day and time that we need to do what we can will feel safe and comfortable. And just like, the Catholic Church has opened up its doors to any buddy who's Jewish that feel uncomfortable, you can go. But, whatever they need to do. And again, I'm not totally on top of what it is. And, maybe you can share more and share what your point of view is, Mark.
Yeah, definitely. I'll get to that as well and everything. But yeah, like I said, I was surprised that they came out with that.
Well, but the same, before we get to the other topics, I have to leave in a few minutes. The thing is, it's happening in Raleigh too. 400 people you showed up at City Hall in Raleigh, and they've asked Raleigh for a resolution. But I think it's just amazing that, unfortunately, I think it's politics. I mean, there is a lot of death going on in the Palestinian side. So I think we also need to also be sensitive to the fact that we can't just allow us to attack Hamas and kill innocent life. And I agree with Shaquille Latimer. I don't think anyone wants to see that. But I think it is a little bit odd that, you have so many other issues locally and you're focusing on this. And you'd hate to think about it, but a lot of it is, addressing the Muslim vote, which I think is going to be big in the presidential race. And it might even be in the city council races, right? So I just feel like it's unfortunate when politics gets in the way of good policy.
Can I just say a couple of things to you there, Steve? And I think we should hear from Sasha on this. But let me just say just two quick things. Firstly, the Muslim vote, obviously, that outnumbers the Jewish vote. I don't think that policies should be made because of one voting bloc versus another. I don't think that's healthy. But even if it was, even just to play the devil's advocate and say that it was healthy, what we've seen in the UK is we've seen, sexual abuse of very young girls generally, very young girls, 12, 13, 11 sometimes, and the police being told that they're not supposed to investigate that because it might upset that part of the community. Well, I come from a Muslim family. My family don't support that. My family, the sorts of people that would actually ring up the police and say, you need to do something about this. So what we're seeing is the more extreme parts of that religious community doing things that the rest of that community don't support. And because everybody is tripping over themselves not to offend anybody, they say, okay, well, we won't do anything about this. And this is what's led to some of the, in my opinion, this is what's led to some of the, anti-Islamic sentiment within Europe at the moment. You're seeing it in places like Sweden. You're seeing it in Germany. It's because people who actually are from that community are saying, please don't do this. Police, you must come in and deal with it. And they're being silenced in order to somehow appease the most extreme part of that group. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think America should do it. I don't think any community should do it. And I think that the idea that you'll lose a voting bloc is a very, very poor reason to give up on the morality that you should have.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that it's unfortunate. And I don't know what the other panel thinks about that, but it's unfortunate. And hopefully there will be a ceasefire.
I would ask the question to the protesters as I do with the climate change people. Okay, you're protesting because you want no further action from Israel towards Palestine. Okay, cool, no problems. That's fine. That's what you're protesting for. What are you proposing? And the same thing with climate change. Just stop oil. Okay, cool. We'll just stop oil then. What are you proposing that we do? And in what time frame? If you can't answer those questions and you don't have any real solutions, I don't think there's any point in you just coming out to complain about something that most of us already agree on. We already agree that these things are problems. The question is, what's the solution? And you can't just sit there and scream and scream without
Just really quickly, and I'd love to hear Sasha's thought about this as well. I was hoping that Adam was going to get on, because one of the things, and some people can say that it's a left-wing media source, and I'm not going to say that it is or isn't, but I was listening earlier to NPR, and they were actually talking about one of Adam's favorite people, Mr. Trump and everything, and they were talking about a rise in authoritarianism and everything in society and all along those lines, because they apparently had one time made a statement that was very complimentary of a leader out of Hungary who has pushed back on some of the rights around migrations and LGBTQ rights and all along those lines. So is there a rise in authoritarianism and that kind of politics, or is that just some more of that political rhetoric that we were talking about earlier? Anybody?
Let's go to Sasha. I think Sasha's been quiet for a while there. Then perhaps Jovi can go next.
I don't think that you will enjoy what I will tell you all. And also, I'm expected to be interrupted in about 20 seconds. So anyway, I'll go ahead and tell you what I've just learned today. The facts are straight. A new poll by the Arab World for Research and Development, a Palestinian research organization, finds that 75% of Palestinians support the Hamas terrorist attacks on October 7th. Hamas official Ghazi Hamad has said that they will repeat October 7th-like attacks until Israel is annihilated. Of course, then now you can continue your demonstrations and protests and everything what you would like to do. The whole purpose of existence of Israel was to provide a home, a defense for Holocaust survivors after Second World War. And until October 7th of this year, Israel carried this mission. No longer. October 7th exposed the dangers of Jews in Israel. They can be attacked anywhere, anytime. There is no place to hide. And so therefore, Israel has no choice as to win this war as it won any other wars against Arabs, or lose it for good. I don't think it will lose it simply because they have 90 warheads with thermonuclear warheads. That's what I mean. And if it comes to shove to push, they will use it and they will take down anybody who wants to destroy Israel. Do you think the country, the people who gave the world the Torah, the all the religion, the Judeo-Christian religion is based on that, and the people who have unproportionate large number of Nobel laureates, do you think that these people will be destroyed? No, it's not going to happen. And now what they have to do and what they are doing now, that on the example of the Palestinians, Gaza, anyone who will ever think about attacking Israel, learn what's happened with Gaza. And even when the Gaza operation will be over, there will be follow-up. What means follow-up? I hope you remember the movie Munich, when after the Olympiad in 72, when 11 Israeli sportsmen were killed, everyone who participated in this attack was eliminated, even if it took several months, even more than a year. Trust me that every person who was involved in planning this October 7th attack, who was any way involved in it, he is walking dead. It will take some time. Everyone will be found and eliminated.
Hey, Sasha, along those same lines, and I did want to hear from you, Jatopia, and everything, but along those same lines, one of the things that I've said to you several times, Sasha, is that I hear what you're saying, and even Hamas themselves said that they knew the consequences of their military action. They knew that the world would react the way that the world has, and they actually have said personally that they wanted to kind of undermine the two-state solution and everything. They have said that publicly on the news sources and everything, and all along those lines. So they have stated that that was their intention, but I don't necessarily think that that is the intention of every Palestinian, and that's where we might disagree and everything. So I don't think that you can make this blanket statement around all Muslims, even though they personally said, and I've read the media sources where they said that they knew the consequences. And like you said, they knew in some cases that they were going to be, for lack of a better term, martyrs to their cause and everything. And there are times that people want to be martyrs for whatever reasons that they want to be martyrs.
Not every Muslim. I think you mean to say every Palestinian.
Every Palestinian, correct.
Muslims, there's a couple of billion of us around the world.
And there are different styles, correct. Thanks for correcting.
Well, let me just remind you what I started with. I started with a new poll by Arab World for Research and Development. A Palestinian research organization finds that 75% of Palestinians support the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th. And then Hamas official, what's his name, Ghazi Hamad, has said that they will repeat October 7th-like attacks until Israel will be destroyed. So this is coming to the idea of solution, so-called, to countries. One is Israel and another one is Palestinians. And while one country already exists and quite successful for the last 75 years, now the proposal is to create a second country which has no idea of the governing itself, of what's involved in it. But this is not my business. Maybe they will learn very quickly how to do it all. However, the main thing is that their goal, as is of today and before today, is destroy the Israel. So how can you coexist with a neighbor whose the only goal is to destroy you? Tell me, Mark. Maybe you know.
Jatovi's had his hand up for a while, but Sasha, when Jatovi finishes, perhaps you can answer the question. In your opinion, if a two-state solution doesn't work and a one-state solution doesn't work, what's the solution? But hold that answer until Jatovi's had a chance.
Just to point out, the poll that you cited, where is that from?
I already said so. It's a Palestinian organization.
So
It calls Arab.
Can anybody hear me now?
And the
We got you.
you've got feedback coming through.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sasha. I was testing my microphone. Please continue.
So where's that feedback coming from?
I just
All right,
fixed
you're
it.
Okay, cool. So basically, you're saying that poll that came from a Palestinian organization that went and polled the individuals in a government or in a country or a selection of people that's governed by a group of people that if you say anything wrong to them, they will kill you. So you're saying that poll is trustworthy because
I don't care.
Sasha, I did not interrupt you. I did not interrupt you. I did not interrupt you.
Listen,
Sasha,
Frank,
I'm
I don't care what you're
I
saying
don't
at
care
all,
what you gotta say
period.
right now.
You
Sasha,
can just be
Sasha,
quiet and just
Sasha, I did
listen
not
what
interrupt
people
you.
are talking,
I did not
okay?
interrupt you. I did not interrupt you.
I don't care. I can interrupt you anytime I want to. You understand this?
I don't care.
Just be quiet and listen what people are talking about.
I am trying to actually
Don't
comment.
try anything. Just keep quiet, okay?
It is my turn to talk.
No, it's not. Nobody gave you right to talk. Just be quiet and sit there.
Sasha, it is my turn to talk.
No, just be
Mark,
quiet
if you
and sit
please put
there.
him on
Or
mute.
just go away.
Please put him on mute.
I
Thank
think
you.
so.
So,
Let's
Kim,
consider something before we
was
move forward. I want people to understand that, I just want to step in for a second, and I want people to understand that we don't want anyone to die. We stand and we take sides with the civilians. I think the leaders have failed in both countries because we know that both sides have been fighting for as long as I've been alive, and I know that to be a fact. I mean, I've heard about it my whole life. So we need to figure out how to fix the problem, right? And the Palestinians have no voice whatsoever. Israel has had lots of voices. I'm not against Israel, but what I'm saying is that they did some things wrong too. They've been nitpicking and aggravating and attacking Palestine just as much as, you can count. You could go look at the stats, and they are real stats. They are not a voice of people who have a gun on them. And if you take a poll of people with a gun on them, of course they're going to say whatever you want them to say, Sasha. And I appreciate what you're trying to say and do, but I don't believe in the Torah any more than I just believe that both the Bible and the Torah go together in a weird sort of way. They're very good historical documents, but I believe in God and no idol, because I don't want anyone to kill me. I have no idols. Okay.
Kimberly, can I just point something out?
I think people who worship the Torah, that's an idol. I think that's my belief. Okay. But hear me out on this. You sit there and you say that they got everyone that killed those people who killed the people in the Olympics. Fine. They went after them individually. How many casualties were involved? I don't know. But they didn't go blow up whole countries to go after those people. And that's what they need to do now. They need to cease fire and go after the terrorists. Go after the people who are causing this problem, the huckleberry in the saddle. Okay? But we need to stop killing innocent people. And Palestinians are innocent in all of it.
Can I just point something out, though? The situation over there is vastly more complicated than that. It's very easy for us to say, sitting in the West, we care about human life. We care about the lives of innocent Palestinians. So Israel should be just careful.
I care about innocent lives in Israel.
Hang on. It's very easy for us to do that. Now, I don't want to try and give a false equivalence, but look at what happened, for example, in Rwanda in 1997 between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And when things changed, when the people in power changed, the West was sitting there going, oh, which side are we on? Who's doing what? The reality is, look, I'm almost 40, okay? I know one Jewish family in Australia. Every other Jewish person that I've ever met has been in North America, or to my knowledge, it was some in Germany, but mostly they've been in America. Okay, this is how small this population is, and they've got this one place. We can look at the maps and go, oh, have the Palestinians got a point? Did Israel take all this land? And then we can go back and try and judge whether or not reasonable peace deals were attempted to be brokered. But the thing is that when we're sitting there saying we care about human life, but we don't really care about what's actually causing the conflict in the first place. And unfortunately, because we live in the West, we're used to certain freedoms, we're used to having certain logic, it means that we may potentially be unable to see some of the issues that the Israeli Jewish people have. And there's a difference between Zionism and Judaism. Okay, people are confused about whether being Jewish is that a race, is it a religion? People have all sorts of issues with this. But I've traveled around the Middle East for a long time. If you actually, up until actually very, very recently, Sasha's favorite president, Donald Trump, would have stopped to this. If you went to Israel, you had to be very careful that they didn't stamp your passport. In fact, what they would normally do is they'd put a piece of paper or a card inside your passport. Because if you had been to Israel, you would not be permitted to go into any other Middle Eastern country. There is so much that the Jewish people have gone through. I'm not trying to condone violence against Palestinians.
Get to the root of the problem is what I've been saying.
But these issues have got to be more complicated than the easy thing to say. It's easy for all of us to say we care about human life. Of course we all do. Nobody's going to disagree with that. We all care about human life. That's not a particularly controversial thing to say. But when that comment is followed up with, because we care about human life, Israel should or shouldn't do certain things, I'm not sure that we're in the best position to I know you want to say so, Jacoby. I'll just finish this one thing. I'm not sure that we're in the best position to make comments on that, and especially when all of us have been born in and live in Western countries, okay? None of our Western countries, if this had have happened to any of our countries, none of our countries would hesitate. I used the example the other day. If tiny little Papua New Guinea attacked Australia, they'd be gone like that. Okay, if Canada was to attack America, might be a little bit different because last time you guys lost that war because the Commonwealth came in and we burnt your White House down. But other than that, if a small little tiny country attacks yours, you're going to react. And what do they call it? Collateral damage when innocent people die. I think we just have to recognize that these issues are complicated. We have for decades backed Israel. We shouldn't turn our back on them now. We should focus on what's going to happen afterwards if we want to get a better form of peace. I hope I've said that well enough, Sasha, to represent a reasonable point of view.
Just tell me how to hold on a second, Kim. Even the UN is focused on, and one of the things that we need to be focused on is working with getting the hostages back. We need to slow down a little bit, take a deep breath, play the game of chess patiently. And like Sasha said, they will get the people. Do it that way. Go get the people. Don't blow up a bunch of innocent people going after.
One second, Sasha.
I'll be right back, guys.
I mean, it's kind of like you want to shoot a deer. Do you blow up the forest?
Kim, here's a great
Do you blow up a forest shooting a deer? No.
The people who planned the Munich, they were individual terrorists. Of course, they were behind this Palestinian Liberation Party or so on, but they were largely individuals. There were so many of them. I don't remember, 8, 9, maybe 12, maybe even 25. It doesn't matter. Now, here we are dealing with a situation when the neighboring, I don't know how to call it, a country or whatever Gaza is. I don't understand what it is, but whatever it is their goal is to destroy the Israel, and they implemented horrific October 7th attack. So we know where attacks originated, who was planning, who implemented. We know all that it's from Gaza, from Hamas. Palestinians, we don't talk about Palestinians. We're trying to save as many lives as possible. But however, one question is, what you are essentially proposing is that Israel stop its attack and will go from house to house and very slow motion to try find, okay, here's a terrorist, here's Hamas, okay, kill him, okay, we're done, okay, next one. Now you have to you have to understand the difference between Palestinians and Hamas people, because Hamas are basically, they look alike and so on, so even that is making difficult. So it will take Israel probably next 25 years to to find them and kill them. I mean, it still could be done, but if there would be some at least comparison of the military capabilities of Israel and Hamas, and you could discuss, okay, maybe you should do this, or maybe you should do this or that. But when Israel has enormous advantage in weaponry, in military might, in economic might, in just anything, it's like Professor John Mearsheimer. He is apologete of real politics. What means real politics is one who is bigger and stronger dictates to another one who is weaker and smaller what to do, when to do, how to do it. So the smaller one and the weaker one has to get up in the morning, call its the Führer, so-called, and say, Mr. So-and-so, okay, what would you like me to do today? Would you like me to dance, or maybe to play some music, maybe? What would you like me to do? This a behavior from weak and small to a big and strong. So while Israel is big and strong, it has to be, if not respected, okay, I understand there is a lot of anti-Semitism. Nobody wants to respect Israel. But you know what? There is a such thing as fear. So if people will fear Israel, that's enough. It's a good substitute for respect, love, and all other things. Just fear. Okay?
Sasha, by that same, hold on a second, I definitely want you to run to Jacoby. I'm going to talk to Jacoby and everything. By that same logic, and Adam will know this because he's a historian, if I remember correctly, in addition to being a lawyer, there was a time, I think it was back in the late 1800s, that several European nations decided to get together and carve up an entire continent and everything. So by your logic, those countries should not have revolted against those countries that included France and Germany and had this Berlin Accord, where they literally decided how they were going to divide up the entire continent of Africa. But what they did is that, and all of those countries technically were bigger and stronger, but they saw that they wanted freedom and they fought for their freedom in all of these countries. Now, we can say that some of those countries became dictators, some of them are democracies, so they went on different paths. But am I not correct, Adam? Was there not a Berlin Accord that was struck where they decided to divide the nations of Africa up and all along those lines? If I'm misquoting history, please correct me.
No, I don't think you're misquoting history at all. But I think, listening to this discussion, I would just make three brief points. Number one, Hamas launched a vicious, disgusting attack against Israel that led to horrible deaths, torture. Now, Hamas has to be eradicated, plain and simple. Now, that's going to be hard to do, and there will be collateral damage. Having said that, there should be a two-state solution. But we came pretty close in 2000 at the Camp David summit, and Palestinians have historically been very, very difficult to reach an agreement with. So a two-state solution, is it possible? I'm not so sure anymore based on history. But does Hamas need to be eradicated? Yes. And as far as the United States goes, I take no moral authority from the United States. George W. Bush is a war criminal who went into Iraq and deposed a leader and led to 300,000 Iraqi deaths. So what is the upshot to all this? We're going to see more of the same going forward, and it's not going to change.
By that same logic, before I get to Jacoby, is Reagan a war criminal too? Because I think he supported the Philippines and the Marcos government and all along those lines. So there have been others that have done what you just said.
Can we pick on a couple of Democrats just to make it even?
I'm not a Democrat, but George W. Bush lied. He lied about the reason. And you don't people's lives are at stake. You don't go into a country and take their leader and their country based on false pretenses. And we had a similar problem with this with Iran with the Shah in the late 70s. Now, I tend to be more conservative, but That was a big blunder. I think ultimately Hamas has to be destroyed, but we have to recognize Palestinians have a right to a state.
Jacoby,
Before you go, I just want to share something with the Pod TV people. I just popped outside for a moment while I was off air, and my next door neighbour came up to me and said, "Hey, I've been listening, and this is the first time I've actually watched the show. That's you on that podcast." So you know, there's even people over here in Sydney that are actually watching and listening to us. So I hope that gives everyone a bit of a thrill.
Hi,
Jacoby, the floor is yours, my friend.
Jacoby, you don't get.
Oh, I didn't know. I started zoning out for a while because my arm got a little tired, and I was listening to somebody talk about dance as an analogy, and I got missed on that. So, just to touch on everything, I guess, that we talked about, the extremists, Shaq, you're right. We do tend to cater a lot to the extremists, and the extreme. And as an example, Sasha, you presented a very extremist view. Shaq tried to come back and present a more balanced approach, but in that balanced approach, there were some parts that were left out, which is what Kim tried to bring in with the Palestinian people. And yes, we all agree on the humanity situation. We really do. And even the hostages and the focus on the hostages, which there was a deal that's actually in the middle of being struck right now between Hamas and Netanyahu in terms of releasing 10 hostages a day over the next 5 days. And that will cause a pause or a ceasefire throughout that time. And that is a positive thing. And that's where we should be. We all agree that Hamas is a terrorist organization. But I think one of the things Kim and I always get into a discussion about is learning the root of the problem. And that's one thing that Shaq, you brought up, talking about the root of the problem. And even Adam, you were talking about how this will reoccur again. As much as we want to talk about destroying an ideology, think about it. Al-Qaeda was an ideology. Al-Qaeda was a group, but it had an ideology. That Al-Qaeda group supposedly got squashed, but you know what popped up? ISIS, ISIL. They had the same ideology and had the same viewpoint. So it's much more than just going in with war and bombing people. In terms of the Palestinian people, they have a gun to their head. And Sasha, as much as you want to hold on to that poll as this is what they really are, it's not a true poll, because as Kim pointed out, when you have a gun to your head or a gun to your kid's head, you're going to answer the question to save either your life or the person that you love's life. And that's what those people are living up under right now. Because we had a guest on yesterday where he talked about how they are living under that way and that rule. So somehow you have people on this side with a gun, people on this side with a gun, and nobody's actually giving them a handout and saying, hey, let's work together to really build something. This one group is telling them, hey, I got a gun to your head, but I'm going to try and save somebody. And so you stay with the devil that you know rather than going to the devil that you don't know. And so honestly, yes, Adam, you're right. A two-state solution is what we should be aiming for. Yes, that was on the actual ballot years back, but we're here today. And there are Palestinians who want to live in peace. And all they want, because if we talk about the histrionics of it, if you look about the history, Joe Biden is older than Israel. Israel is not that old of a nation. That is a fact. Israel was built at a particular time. It was actually a land taken from Egypt and given to the Jewish individuals, correct? Yes.
No, it's not correct.
Then
it's not correct. Come on. Jews lived there for 4,000 years. Do you understand that?
Stop.
Learn history.
Stop, Sasha.
No, I'm not stopping. You first learn history. You are in public broadcasting and you're lying. Keep lying and lying and lying. Enough is already.
I already talked. It's my turn to talk. I've let you talk.
I don't care about your turn. You're lying, okay? Stop it.
When was Israel established? What year?
4,000 years ago, okay? Israel and Judea and Samaria, 4,000 years ago, you plank.
Shaq, you can answer the question for me because I know Sasha's heated right now and not going to answer. Israel is younger in terms of being established than Joe Biden, correct?
No. You asked me a question. You asked me a question. You didn't want Sasha to answer it. Let me answer it. I think that is a misunderstanding of what's happened. And Look, forget about Jewish history. If you're Christian, the Israelites are mentioned in the Bible, so they've got to have been around since at least then, surely.
When was Israel established? We have documented history. When was the war?
When was Israel unestablished?
When was Adam? These two just don't want to answer because they're running around trying to come up with.
Adam's answered you, 1492.
Israel was established. Here, we're going to type this in just for the fun of it. Israel.
Hold on a second.
In what year? 1948. 1948 is when it was established. If we talk about the histrionics, hold on, Shaq, I'll get to your question. If we talk about the histrionics, that war in itself caused a problem within the history of that region. So that region has a lot behind it. And the occupation itself is part of that problem. And so when we look at these things and all they're fighting for is a two-state solution, which is what Adam actually suggested earlier, which is actually the policy of the U.S. that has been there forever. But ever since we've decided to choose a side, we become a not a good actor in negotiations. That's why Qatar is still there and actually doing a good job. So again, the point being, if we're talking about the people and the humanity, and we don't want to fight over this histrionic stuff over and over, we have to be honest about what happened. And we have to be honest about moving forward. When you talk about a solution, which is something that we all talk about, and yes, it is a very complex situation because Netanyahu was funneling money to Hamas because he thought he could control Hamas and destabilize the Palestinian Authority so he could actually steer away from actually having that two-state solution, which was a position of peace. Because yes, Kim is right. It's all because of money. Iran, just as Mr. Washington yesterday talked about how the money funnels in, and there's a lot of money in war. So that keeps Hamas, the head leaders of Hamas paid. That keeps the head leaders of Netanyahu paid.
I'm so glad Iran.
Israel.
I'm so glad Iran is talking
Netanyahu,
about
the people of the Palestine did not want Hamas. So when we argue back and forth, let's be honest. That's it. The humanity and the hostages all should be the forefront.
So can I just ask you a question here, right? Firstly, on your before I ask you a question, just firstly on the two-state solution, this was something the Palestinians didn't want, by the way. The Palestinians didn't want a two-state solution. Israel did. Now the majority of Israelis are saying they don't want it, and that's why I make the comment. If we are going to promote a two-state solution, we need to be able to articulate what that's actually going to look like. But that's not my question to you. My question to you is this. If what you are saying is true in relation to the polls that Sasha has brought up, that the reason why 75% of people have responded that they support Hamas is because they're afraid, they've got a gun pointed to their head, figuratively speaking, and they're afraid of being killed, shouldn't we have seen a 25% decrease in the Palestinian population then? Because it's only 75% of them that actually said they support Hamas. So shouldn't the other 25%, based on what you're saying, shouldn't the other 25% have been killed then?
That's a false premise because, again, if somebody comes and you're interrupting me, you ask me a question, so let me please answer. So, again, if we're talking about one where the two-state solution that you're talking about that was 20 years before, that was actually before Hamas. And that was actually the reason Hamas came into power, and the reason that they were voted in was because the government that Palestine had, the Palestinians had before, was actually even corrupt too. So then the Hamas leaders tried to come in, and the actual leader of Hamas who got voted in actually sounded very reasonable. So what ended up happening before, because what we're doing right now is talking about, well, Hamas today is what was running in 2006. That is untrue. They actually have a videotape of the man who actually ran and actually won the vote from the Palestinian people. And the person who ran in his campaigns sounded very reasonable. Anyone here would have voted for him based on the corruption that you've dealt with, that was going on prior. So therefore, when Hamas came into power, they sounded reasonable, but then they dropped all of that. And now they became who they are. And they haven't had an election since. So that two-state solution destabilized the area. You know who kept pushing that, who kept trying to fight against that two-state solution? Netanyahu. Do you know who is the extremists that are in his cabinet? They're pointed out and well documented that they are extremists, and they are the ones who are against the two-state solution.
Well, Arafat made it tough
I'm
too.
glad that
So
you.
again, that's
I'm
the
glad that you now agree
destabilization.
with me,
Now,
Toby.
getting
I'm glad that you now agree with me that the US should be off the hook for all of the things that Adam talks about the
No.
horrible history of
No.
the US going in and doing all these
I've
other things.
never said
Because
that.
the government's changed.
I
The
have
people
never
in charge
said
have
that.
changed. It's not the
Jack,
same government
we
today
had a
as what it was
conversation
30 years
earlier.
ago.
We had a conversation earlier. I never said that.
I know you didn't. That's why I've said it so you can respond to it. I know you didn't say that.
Well,
I'm
Okay,
saying-
so yes, the U.S. is not off the hook for any of that. The
But
I
U.S.
want to bring
shouldn't
up
they be if
something I
Palestine's
think
off the
is
hook?
No,
very-
let's hear from Kim and Adam and everything. I was going
I
to say
just
that
wanna-
just
I just want to
really
point
quickly,
out
Kim,
something,
just really
and I
quickly, I
get
was
it.
just
This
going to
is
say about semantics and everything, because I did hear the argument that Kim was making and everything, and I do think that sometimes we do get caught up in semantics. So there is a modern Israel, and I think that that's where Jacoby was going. That is what was established in 1948, and is one that has a dear Jewish person in my life, maybe like I've said before, my dad's other half and everything. Yes, she would probably argue with she would have the same argument that I think that Sasha has, which is that there was a Israel that is the historical Israel that can go back 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years or whatever along those lines. But that is not the modern Israeli state, which is what I think Jacoby was trying to go. But that's a semantics conversation, whether we're talking the history, like the overall history, or the history of modern day times.
And I think that I want to just point out that it's very hard for me to understand. You have all of these religions who say that they believe in life, the pro-lifers that exist around me. And then I hear them say, oh, collateral damage, human life, big deal. It's just a war. Okay, you men, really? And then you want to come to me and say, don't do abortion? I'm going to start getting back in people's faces in a not so nice way. You want pro-life so that you can kill people, and that's sick. And it's very sick to sit here and say you're of God. What do you think God thinks when you sit there and you go, oh, it's okay to kill all of these people so that you can kill the 2 or 3 people you want to kill? What do you think God's going to say to you in heaven? You know what? You sit here and you preach your God, your Torah, which is an idol. God is not and does not want you to have idols, but people worship them. They worship the temple. They protect their temples. God is God if you believe in God. And if you read your Bible or whatever book you read. But I don't think God would really look favorably on anyone who sat here and said, you know what, get over it because it's just collateral damage and they're just lies, because every one of them, if you believe in God, is a child of God. And I am not a religious freak, but I get sick and tired of having religion shoved down my throat every day of people who say they're religious. And then they come on here and say, oh, it's okay to kill people. I have a problem with that. You want to go after a terrorist who killed some of your people? Go after the terrorist. Go after him just the same way the mob goes after them. They don't go blowing up a city to get 1 or 2 people. They go after those 1 or 2 people. And that's what needs to happen. And I'm going to pass it to Adam because he's been super duper quiet and polite.
Right, yeah, definitely. Before you get to Adam, I was going to say I have to push back on something you said.
Sorry.
I do remember the Valentine Day massacre, and there were some people that were innocent that were put in that massacre and everything. They were not the intended targets. And correct me if I'm wrong again, because you're the one that's got the Italian background. But I do think, as I recall the history of the Valentine Day massacre, there were some people that were not the intended targets. I'll just put it that way.
Sure. I'm going to say something that's going to be probably pretty controversial, and I really like your thoughts. We could say Hamas needs to be eradicated. There needs to be a 2-state solution. We can, say all these things, but the devil is really in the details. But one thing that I've learned, and I say this reluctantly, is that it seems to me that peace and harmony is more likely to occur in homogenous societies. That diversity, in fact, can be very destructive. And when you see on college campuses, African-American students say, or some in some colleges, they have segregated living spaces. I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because people like to be around people who think like them, who empathize with them, who share collective experiences. And I've started to believe that without an underlying set of common values that unites people of diverse cultures, diversity can actually be destructive. And I never thought I would feel that way. It really makes me sick, but I believe that to be true. And when I look at Norway, when I look at Finland, when I look at other countries, it's like, I'm not criticizing diversity, or I'm not criticizing different cultures or races. I'm saying that a homogenous society seems to provide the best prospects for peace. So if we had a two-state solution, great. Is it going to happen? Probably not. Are we going to see more of the same? Yes, because they just can't get along, and that's not going to change.
Ron, can I know if you want to say anything?
Build a wall. Build a Trump wall there. Take the money and put Trump's wall there.
Kim, there was a wall which was destroyed by Hamas on October 7th. There was a wall. It was destroyed. It was taken by terrorists on October 7th.
I mean, do you think people in California want to be around people from Mississippi?
Can I make a couple of quick comments?
That's why I don't believe in walls.
So Kim, I'm not sure. I understand your sentiment, and I do actually somewhat agree with you in what you're saying about God. I will just say that all Abrahamic religious texts can be quite violent in what they say you should do to people that don't agree with you. But I'll leave that aside for a moment.
Yeah,
in relation to the Torah, I don't think the Torah is a false idol. And actually, the Jewish people and the Muslims actually have a lot more in common on this issue than the Christians do with the Jews, because the Jewish people believe, and please correct if I'm wrong here, Sasha, the Jewish people believe that the way that Christians pray in churches with statues of Jesus and symbols of the Mother Mary and all that sort of stuff is false idolatry, the same as the Muslims feel about the Christians. So actually, the Muslims and Jewish on this issue have a lot more in common. But I just want to come to what Adam just said about diversity. This is something that has played in my mind really for a very big part of my life, because obviously, child of the 80s, I was not exactly in an area where there was a whole heap of people of color in my area. I was the only one. It was me and my mother, and that was it. Like, everybody else was white. So then today people say, well, you're sort of white on the inside, Shaquille. Look, I think the reason why people say that is because I have a deep love and admiration for Australia. I don't always like its politics. I often don't like the people in charge. But I love the country. I love the people in this country. And as an extension of that, I love the allies, of which the strongest and most powerful is the United States. I love what we stand for in the Five Eyes Nations. So it breaks my heart when I see an American flag get burned at a protest. Why? I'm not American. Why should I care? Because it's a symbol. The American flag is a symbol of something that represents the freedom and liberty that my family didn't have generations ago. So if you don't have that common love for a country or for the countries that you're moving to, I know this sounds horrible and racist and otherizing, but why don't you move? Like, my family weren't happy where they were, so they tried to move. And where did they go? They went to New Zealand, they went to Australia, they went to the United States, they went to Canada. If you live in the United States and Canada and you are so horrified by what you see, and you so dearly feel that the United States is such a terrible country, why don't you try to move to a country that you think more accurately reflects who you are? So I think when it comes to diversity, I don't think, Adam, it's just diversity because of skin color, because I know I get along very well with people of all different ethnicities, and I don't really care where they're from originally 10 generations ago or 1 generation ago. I don't really care what religion somebody's from. Why? Because the common value is the values that our countries are supposed to champion more than anything else. Right. And I think it's a real shame that we're not teaching our kids that. We're instead teaching our kids that things like where you're originally from, religion, ethnicity, whatever, sexuality, gender, that those things matter more. And I don't think that they should.
But Shaquille, I know Jacoby had his hands up, but Shaquille, along those same lines.
Let Adam respond, because I sort of directed much of my comments to Adam.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying, that diversity is only effective when there's a set of underlying common values and understandings. Otherwise, diversity can be destructive, and homogeneity actually can be more beneficial. I mean, think about it. I'm going to go out on a limb here. In the United States, for a black citizen and a white citizen to get along, number one, the white citizen is going to have empathy and at least some attempt to understand the very disparate experiences that an African American person has undergone. I would say the Black citizen is going to have to at least try to disabuse themselves of the notion that all whites are privileged. What we're doing in this country is exactly what you said. We're dividing people along the lines of identity, and that is destroying those underlying common values and making diversity harmful rather than helpful. You have to be able to see the world through other people's eyes and not your own. You have to empathize with them to be able to develop those common values. And in the United States, we're doing precisely the opposite.
Good, Toby.
Just to point out, one, if we go back to just to touch on the religious thing, there are plenty. The good things about religion we don't focus on. They're all the bad things about religion that cause the most wars across our history. Religion was one of the bases for the majority of the wars that have been fought in our history. So when we talk religion, we got to realize that there are religions that are no longer with us, but they were the religions of the land, like the Olmec religion and Finnish paganism. Those are all religions, but that teaches. So religions come and go, and you just have to realize that your religion is how you found your centerpiece, and that's what gives you peace amongst others and how you live your life. So that's a good thing. But in terms about diversity, that brings that in. So diversity of religion, diversity of color, diversity of cultures, diversity of individuals, diversity of abilities. All these things are positive. And yes, everybody agrees that, okay, well, we can have the same value system, but we need to be able to champion each other's culture because, again, I have never had an Australian dish, but I'm sure I can take something from that dish and make what I cook even better. But that's the thought that people don't really think about. What both Adam and Shaq keep shaking their heads about is that, oh, well, diversity does wrong. No, it should be something that we should celebrate. For example, where Kim comes from is something that could help me in my life. Where Adam, his history, why he has those tattoos on his arm, what is the culture behind that, and why can't we celebrate those things rather than, oh well, Adam had tattoos on his arm, they suck. No, that's not the way we should be. And thinking about, if we talk about having a value system, our value system is not based on, hey, this is your identity. Your identity is who you are and should be celebrated. So we need to change our mindset instead of thinking so negative about people who are different from us. And just because they bring something different to the table than what you already have. That's the problem, not diversity.
Well, I think
firstly, I don't think that other people's perceived version of my identity when it comes to what cultural background I come from is a strength that I have. But secondly, everything you've just said there, I think it depends on the situation. For example, I have a great deal of respect for Adam. I'm sure that he's a great lawyer given the position that he has had or continues to have at universities. Now, if I am sitting there and I am working on a tax issue to do with Australian tax law, I am not, for the sake of diversity, going to say to all my tax lawyers, look, guys, you're too Australian. I need to get an American lawyer. I'm going to get an American-Italian lawyer with previous connections to the mafia in New Jersey to come in. That's not what I said. He might be able to weigh in on it. That's not what I said. That's what diversity would be. That's what diversity would be. Just like if Adam was a separate law firm, just like if Adam was a separate law firm, and then I came to America and said, hey, I'm pretty good at American law. I know the Constitution reasonably well. I want to learn law. And then Adam says to me, you know what, Shaquille?
That is not what I said.
A Fijian, Indian, Australian, British guy.
That is not what I said.
The diversity of our firm. It doesn't.
That is not what I said. That is not what I said.
But I know it's not what you said, but if the logic of what you're saying is if diversity is our strength, then that's what we should do. We should always be looking for someone. I'm not going to look at Adam. I didn't even know Adam was Italian. I knew he wasn't Irish, but I didn't know. So I'm not going to look at Adam and go, well, I need more Italians.
Just to button your comment up. Just to button your comment up.
When I'm in America, so therefore, Adam, hey, you're Italian, come on in, even though he's a lawyer and not in finance.
Just to button your argument up. For example, diversity of employment. Again, I'm not going to go to you for health advice. I'm going to go to a doctor. Also, if I'm a medical professional, I know I can relate to a medical professional better. If I am African American, Mark and I can have some conversations that you and I couldn't. It's just it's the way it is. Sasha is Jewish. Sasha can have conversations with other Jewish individuals better than I could. Kim can have better conversations with women better than I could. Adam could have conversations with other individuals like him better than I could. No, Shaq. That is Shaq.
You interrupted me.
Shaq, we're going to do this again. We're going to do this again. Let me finish.
Wrap it up.
You have just, your point that I am understanding is that you believe that I said, well, we must have diversity because that's what we got to focus on. So we're just going to let this person go. That's nothing that I said. I talked about the celebration of individuals instead of utilizing it as a tool to degrade individuals. So therefore, my argument is completely different. My argument is against what you guys were talking about, how diversity is a bad thing.
You said it. I didn't.
Well, I said that.
I've had plenty of conversations with Sasha. I went to Toronto. I met Sasha. I met his family. I didn't know they were Jewish. We had perfectly fine conversations and enjoyed some lovely fun. But this idea that diversity is our strength, if that is true,
relate to Australians
if that is true, no.
That's a lie.
No.
Oh, come on.
If you believe that, then what you should do is tell AOC to be quiet about what Australians should do in the outback when she was telling us that we should backburn just before we had all the bushfires.
Better than I do.
If diversity is our strength,
to Australians better than I could. It's a fact.
I'm actually responding to you. We can't both speak. If diversity is our strength, then what we should do is try to find people who are the most not like us, not because we think they're going to be better or worse at the job, but just because it's diversity. That doesn't make any sense.
Shaquille, just hold a second, and I definitely want to hear. So if I'm hearing you correctly, and I said this before and I'll say it again, they have had me come to different institutions, including the esteemed institution of Duke, to talk about some of the history of the African-American community in Durham, including some of the ugliness. So I definitely bring some of the positive aspects of what was going on in Black Wall Street, but I also talk about those that were going in for the money and going in for the money sources. So some of the negatives, some of the warts that goes on with that as well. So that being said, if I'm hearing you correctly, and that's even kind of coming into the conversation around historical Black Wall Streets, and there are a number of them in the country and everything. And there are some people that will argue, and I think rightfully, that there was a intention to gentrify and to run highways through neighborhoods that were, to your point, Adam, they were very unified and very much of a homogenous group and everything. But after those communities were destroyed, then they lost some of that economic power. So if I talk about that and I bring that up in these conversations, if I'm hearing you correctly, Shaquille, even though I'm talking to people that don't know that history, then I am doing a disservice by talking about some of that history and giving them some.
No, not at all. I think the history is very important, but I'll give you the same example that I've used many times on this show. When I was in North Carolina, I went to the Charlotte Museum of History. Mm-hmm. They were raising money to move the slave school from where it was onto the grounds of the museum, and I highly suggest that everybody in North Carolina gets behind that effort and supports it. Now, one of the questions that was asked, very nicely, very politely, was, "Hey, like you're Australian, you're not from here. What's your interest in this? Like, why are you even?" And I made a pretty large donation to them. "Why are you even interested in this?" And I said, "Because whilst my family didn't go through something quite as brutal as slavery, it wasn't far off, and my grandparents and great-grandparents, whatever, very likely would have gone to a school very similar to this and grown up in similar sort of conditions. And I think this is a part of history that needs to be memorialized." What I'm saying to you is I don't think that people should be discriminated against, but this idea that diversity is our strength, and so therefore we should look for people who are totally different to us because somehow that makes us stronger when we have conflict on all these other issues not related to the job, doesn't make sense to me. Most lawyers that
Let
come
me
on.
help you. Let me help you understand. Let me help you understand. You said it doesn't make sense.
Toby, Adam's going next.
Mom!
Most
Hey, you
lawyers
interjected
who come onto our network have actually said to me, you should come to America and study law because you know the US Constitution and US law is better than most Americans. Okay? They're not saying that to me because I'm of my ethnicity. They're saying that because of who I am. All right? But I'll tell you, Kimberly, who I love and adore, who we don't always agree with. I don't like her comments when she says men do this and men do that. I don't agree with her on that. But I'll tell you something that Kimberly's never said to me. Kimberly has never said to me, you know what, Shaquille, you should come over to America and go into IT because I'm a technophobe. There's no point saying that to me because I'm not a good fit for that. I'm not accusing Kimberly of being racist, right? Because there's no Fijian, Indian, Australian, British guys in North Carolina doing IT. It just doesn't make sense.
Okay,
so
let me
versus our strength thing. It doesn't make sense.
Again, let me jump in real quick right before you can take it away, Adam. Now, to help it make sense, the Australian experience is different from the experience in the US, correct? If I grow up in the US and you grow up in Australia, who can speak better about the Australian experience?
Are you asking me?
That's another one of those.
That's for you,
No.
Adam.
Well, look.
Now,
Take it away.
that's a simple question and it's a simple answer, and we all know it.
It's a false equivalence.
It's not a false equivalent. Shaq, you can. So you're saying that I can speak better about the Australian experience than you?
As I said before,
No,
AOC
Shaq, don't do that.
As I said before,
Don't do that. Don't do
AOC
that.
had
Don't do
absolutely
that.
no problems at all in telling us what to do in our outback before we had
Don't
the
do that.
bushfires. Pink came over to Australia and criticised our sheep farmers for milking the sheep. Right?
So,
Americans come over
in
all the
other
time
words-
and tell us what they think that we should do, just like America goes around the world,
So
which
again,
you guys have
answered my
said.
question.
You
Thank
guys
you.
go all
Answered
over
my
the world
question.
telling us what you think we should
That
do.
means that
America
you
does
can talk about the Australian
America
experience
does
better
that.
than I can. So that means why? You are from Australia, I am from the US. So basically, our diverse opinions here, just like how Sasha can talk about Canada better than I can, no matter how much time I spend in Canada, which I have spent a lot. Sasha lives there. He can tell
So
me
if-
more
if
about
we-
the
if we
Canadian
are talking
experience.
about
Shaq,
issues to do
Shaq,
with-
we've already established that the
law
fact
or
is,
taxes
the
or
fact
human
is,
rights
the
or
fact is,
transportation
the
or what government
fact
funding
is,
should be, those
the
issues are
fact of the
universal,
matter
especially
is,
across the
they
Western
could
world.
not at Duke, the institution that Mark was actually asked to come and speak at, they couldn't have a white person come and talk about the Black experience. They had to have Mark. Why? Because he's Black. You cannot have you talking about diversity. You have to think about that. You can't tell me about the Black experience. You can't for the life of you. You're not Black, and I get that. I can't tell you about the Australian experience. I can't tell you about the Muslim experience. I can only tell you about mine. And mine.
But you seem to be prepared to tell Sasha about what Israel should and shouldn't be doing in relation.
Sasha's
to
not from
Palestine.
Israel. Is Sasha from Israel? And how
No,
did we
but he's
switch to
Jewish.
Israel?
I've been-
You have
I've
no
been
problem
to
telling
Israel
him what
several
the Jewish
How did we
community
switch to the
should
My
Israeli
do.
wife
topic?
family
You're
lives
throwing
in
against the
Israel for
wall because you
35
cannot handle that. You're wrong. Adam, take it away.
I'll be very brief. Diversity can be a good thing, but diversity can be a bad thing. Diversity is a good thing when people are united by underlying values that transcend their race, their sexual orientation, their ethnicity. For example, I would suspect that in Australia there's people of a variety of backgrounds, but they are fundamentally Australian. When I hear the Russian national anthem and I see people in Russia, they are Russian. And their common values, whether you like them or not, transcend this individual identity and these identity politics that actually cause division and make diversity harmful rather than something to celebrate. We have to recognize that we're so much more than these characteristics. We're individual people, and if we don't have common values that we share, such as civility, respect for different opinions, okay, freedom of expression, then diversity isn't going to mean anything. And that's why in some situations a homogenous environment can be better. And I hate to say that, but I believe that to be true.
Hey, Adam, just really quickly, can a group be hijacked and everything, because that's one of the things, and I'm just going to bring it up, that I have heard, and I'm not a part of this group and everything, but there are some people that were seeing the pride ceremonies and seeing some of the things that the LGBT community were doing, and they were feeling that it was not representing their community, that there were some things going on that even the members of that community did not like, and all along those lines, they were feeling that they were, even though they might have had a certain cause when they created Pride, that it was being hijacked by other groups. That's a conversation that was even going on with the African American community and certain feminists, that they were feeling that the feminists were hijacking the movement and all along those lines. So, and this is very neat, buddy. And I'm just wondering.
That's the problem with identity politics. It pits groups against each other and erodes those common values. I mean, you may be gay, you may be straight, you may be trans, whatever race you are. Are there common values in your community that you both share? Okay. And if you don't, diversity is going to be a source of friction. Okay. And that's why I do believe, in some respects, there are some homogenous countries that are very happy, like the Nordic countries. And I'm not talking against diversity. I'm saying diversity is not inherently by itself beneficial, absent
nothing is inherently great. Jonestown was homogenous.
Well, why are you insulting Jonestown?
I'm just saying.
They were a religious community.
That was a homogenous community.
Yeah, but what do you
so
mean by
just saying that homogenous is nothing is, everything is a work towards. And what diversity adds in, again, diversity adds in other thought. That's why when we're trying to create and design and build things, that's where diversity comes into play. Because, for example, if you look at even in the movies right now, the top movie of this year, you know what it was? It was Barbie.
Rocky.
You know who that was directed by? It was actually directed by a woman. And the thing is, had we had a man direct Barbie, that wouldn't have lasted. That wouldn't have worked.
It would have. That'd take
I don't agree with you. I think that's our philosophical difference. You see things through the lens of gender. In that situation,
that isn't a lens of gender. That's the fact that diversity worked in that situation.
Let me ask you.
You took it to a different degree. You took it to it's a negative because she's woman and blood.
Let me ask you a question.
No, it's not that. It's about diversity, offering other ideas, other viewpoints, because diversity, especially even in business, it's the same thing.
Shaquille, you had a question.
Let's respond. You've said it. Don't repeat it. If what you're saying is correct in relation to diversity, okay, and when Adam says a homogenous society, I don't know whether he means skin color, religion, or whether he just means values. I think he just means values. But let me ask you this: if you think that it is actually about skin color, race, gender, ethnicity, all the rest of it, shouldn't we actually be suggesting to Africa that there's not enough white people there, and there's not enough Asian people there, and there's not enough people of all these other cultures? Shouldn't we be going to Asia and saying, look, you don't have enough diversity in Indonesia? You need more white Europeans there. You need more people from diverse backgrounds there. Isn't that going to make it better based on what you've just said about diversity?
Incorrect. You took one characteristic of an individual and didn't even talk about the cultures that they bring into that characteristic. For example, let me clear this up for you. Let me clear this up for you. You're saying the same analogy.
Hold on a second, both of you. But one thing that I would bring, and this is not totally a pushback to you, but there was a movement, and I think it's still going on, to bring particularly African Americans into some of those countries because
No. Don't change the goalposts. I didn't say bring African Americans.
This isn't changing the goalposts. What it is, Shaq, is you don't understand the whole thing about what diversity we're talking about.
Iceland and Russia and the Ukraine, and tell them that they need to make sub-Saharan Africa stronger by having diversity, by them going and moving over there. Sasha, help me out here.
Of course, you're not making sense. I don't know what you're talking about. Go ahead, Sasha.
Of course I'm not making sense. I'm trying to repeat your talking points. Sasha.
No, you're not repeating my talking points. You're making up stuff. So, Sasha, go ahead.
Okay, I want to tell you from Canadian perspective, the American so-called melting pot doesn't work. It never was tried in Canada. Canada has completely different policy. They have a policy of communities. Let's see, there's in Toronto, some of you were
Here I come, Mama.
there's a great Greek community or Italian community, very large, 500,000 people plus. Jewish community, Russian community, just name it. There are all kinds of communities. And that works, I think, better than melting pot, simply because, okay, if you take melting pot, okay, so people learning English, they're becoming a part of society, they're getting jobs, they're doing something, they're getting ahead in their lives. But at the end of the day, somebody in Lamparella will remain Italian. It's not going to escape that fact. And then somebody Greek will remain Greek and will run his Greek restaurant for the rest of his life, and then his children and grandchildren. So you cannot escape through a melting pot process of who you are. And then we are coming to those of you who learn history just a little bit. You understand the concept of building society, where it starts. It starts with the tribes. Well before there were nations building process, and there were nations and countries or so on, they were tribes. There were families. And that never disappeared anywhere. I mean, I must admit, though, that in Soviet Union in the 1920s, there were attempts to completely kill the social fabrics and build up completely new society. For example, Adam, you probably don't know about that, but they had so-called communes. The commune was 100 people, for example, 50 men, 50 women. They all, of course, trying to build communism. So they had works, they studied somewhere or so on. And the idea of commune was that they would raise children all together. So when women had children, they didn't know who is the father. It could be anybody from the commune. It could be this man or maybe that man. It doesn't matter. It's all communes. They're all equals. They're all building communism. They're all happy. So children should be happy as well. Okay. Then that experiment was stopped in the end of 20th. So it was around for about close to 10 years, less than 10, probably 8-9 years for sure. Some people loved it, some people didn't like it. It depends on you. Or, there are some women, for example, who were extremely popular in these communes, and they had several men who was getting crazy about them or so on. So now there were some other women who were not so popular, so of course they didn't like that arrangement. Men were extremely happy because they can have as many women at any time as they just wanted. So that was the happiest situation for men, for obvious reasons. It's like, I remember the Dr. Strangelove, when Dr. Strangelove explains how to save humankind from this nuclear winter. So he's saying, okay, so what you do, you put deep into the ground so many people, and there has to be proportion 1 man for 10 women. And that general who heard that, he was so happy because to procreate, they need a lot of women and not so many men. So he was extremely happy about that. And now what I'm driving at is the fabrics of humankind, starting from family, tribes. It's not disappearing, whether under the melting pot idea of United States or commune building in Canada, it's still there. But I think that the community building in Canada is more natural because, okay, so you have, for example, Greek people, okay, so they live, if you know Danvers Street in Toronto, there are Greek restaurants like on 5 square meters, there would be probably 6 Greek restaurants. And
Sasha, I think the melting pot idea is a much better idea because, if I move to Russia, I will never be Russian. But if I move to America, there will become a time when I will be able to say, even with the accent that I've got, that I'm American.
Not true.
If I get
That's
to meet,
because we have all kinds of accents.
If I get to meet Adam at some point, I hope that I do, and we go to a bar, I will not tolerate if he buys the drinks, somebody saying to me, well, as he should because of his white privilege. Or if I buy the drinks, somebody lecturing me that he's taken advantage of me, I've bought the drinks because of his white privilege. No, he's somebody I like. He's a friend. We're having a drink. Leave us alone. And there are very few countries that you can do that in. I know that Canada does have many, communities where they stay a little bit insular, and perhaps for the first or second generation of people, when they first move there, it makes sense that they stay in their own communities. But after that, once you've been born in a country and maybe your parents are born there, who cares where you come from? Be part of that country. And if you don't like the country, move.
But Shaquille, hold on a second. Shaquille, along those same lines and everything, just really quickly, Shaquille, along those same lines and everything, so will you accept Bull's privilege? And Jacoby will know what I'm talking about because he is the part of the Bull staff and everything. So will you accept Bull's privilege if he gets you some tickets to the baseball game? I don't even know if you like baseball and all along those lines. So will you accept Bull's privilege if Jacoby gets you tickets to a Bulls game and everything? Because he does have privileges that I don't have because he's actually connected to the Bulls.
I will absolutely accept it, and I will sit there and watch a sport that the World Series has only ever been won by America, or Canada won it once. That the World Series has only been won by America, and I will sit through all 76 hours of that game to watch it, no problems. You're muted, Adam. If you're speaking, you're muted.
Just point. Oh, okay, Adam, you got it.
No, go ahead, Joe. I was just going to say, forget the World Series. I want a tour of the Kremlin.
Oh, I was just gonna make a joke because we keep talking about how diversity is such a bad thing in humanity. Well, and how Sasha went down this whole road. I got lost along the way. But talking about this whole road of, we stay within ourselves. Well, and there's a stereotype against West Virginians, how and country people, how they sleep with their own and stuff like that. That's a bad joke. But that's that whole stereotype joke. But
they have sex with their sisters.
Yeah. So the thing is, if diversity
it's not quite sure any of the rest of us, isn't that
diversity works in nature because deformities happen. The cheetah itself sleeps within its own community and sleeps within its own sisters, brothers, and all that connection that's there. So that family line is basically a straight line. That leads to a lot of deformities in nature and in the actual body. So that's scientifically proven, that diversity, and it just doesn't have to be. When we speak diversity, why people jump to it's always about race. It's not always about race. There's also diversity in gender because women provide a different viewpoint than men. Transgender individuals provide a different viewpoint than cisgender individuals. Even in hold on, Shaq, even in the Muslim community, how we talk about it's not a monolith. Same thing in the Black community, it's not a monolith. There are other individuals have diversity of thought. So therefore, yes, value system, that's great. Yes, we can all focus on a value system that we can all agree on, and it moves down that way. But that diversity of thought, that diversity of people, that diversity within itself is a positive thing. That is why, again, the U.S. Army or the U.S. military actually has said, based on studies, and this is something that we haven't done, this is what they have done to prove that diversity actually is a positive thing. Because as I stated, and getting back to that example that I gave earlier, if they go into another country and they need to understand that culture better, if they have somebody in that military group that can speak the language, speak the native tongue, can actually relate with the culture and understand what's right and wrong and what you can and cannot do, that makes that outfit a little bit stronger than a bunch of dudes walking in who don't know what they're doing.
The diversity quotas that are going on in America have nothing to do with bringing people in from different countries. Okay, if that's true, why doesn't the American military advertise in Australia? Because, it's a pathway to citizenship, right? You come to America, overstay your visa. It's a pathway to citizenship to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces.
They do actually. Shaq, just because you laugh, you didn't know the fact that they actually respond to you.
I know a lot about your military. Thank you very much. Your diversity argument.
Then why did you make that comment? That's a false comment.
Your diversity argument has to do with trans people and all these other issues, okay? If diversity is such a good thing for the reasons that you just outlined about being able to get on with other countries, then the United States military should say, look, we've got too many Americans. What we need to do is we need to get people from all the countries that we're going to attack and
The
bring them
fact
into
that
our
you're
country.
laughing and you know the
understand the
fact that they
culture.
do that
That's
shows how little you understand of the whole conversation and how disingenuous your argument is.
Oh, well, please inform
But
me.
Shaquille and Jacoby, just really quickly, one of the things I was getting ready to say is, and I've never said this on this show, but it's actually an event that, and I don't know that you would enjoy it. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. But one of the events that my dad turned me on to, and ironically, Kim, it was in Raleigh and everything, and I think they still do it. But I used to love going before the pandemic and before some economic concerns of my own and everything to the International Festival. And part of the reason I used to love going to the International Festival in Raleigh is because I got to experience a lot of cultures that, because I don't have the resources to go to, say, Australia or Greece or a number of these other places, I would get a chance to explore those cultures, because they would have dances from those cultures. They would have music and food from, I mean, that is music, but they would have food from those cultures. So I would get to explore parts of the world that hopefully I get to visit, like Australia, that I might not get to visit.
Just like when you guys go to Outback with some like American actor putting on an Aussie accent. That's a great reflection of Australia. But Sasha, look, I know you might disagree with all the other panelists on many issues, but I actually have found out the solution for Israel from being on this show. The IDF needs more diversity. What the IDF has done wrong, they haven't understood the enemy. The IDF needs to start actively recruiting Hamas and Palestinians to join them.
Actually, Shaq,
that way,
as much
they'll
as
understand for the cultural.
As much as you want to joke and laugh about it, that is actually a legitimate solution. Because think about it.
I'm glad you agree.
Yeah, so think about it, Shaq. Think about it. Hold on. Think about it. Now, Hamas actually, and this goes into the homogenous thing that both you and Adam were advocating for, the fact that Hamas actually is homogenous under their rule. The Palestinians have to follow Hamas, have to do this, but they don't know anything else because the actual information that they receive is from Hamas and actually monitored. So that homogeny that you're looking for, Adam and Shaq, that is actually what's going on in Russia, that's going on in Palestine. So everything that you just said in terms of diversity and in terms of diversity of thought, actually giving the Palestinian people and actually a breath of fresh air, seeing that there's another opportunity for them, is actually diversity. So
but
yes,
Jacoby, hold on a second. I want to direct this to Sasha, because if I heard Sasha correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sasha, and everything, if I heard Sasha correctly one time, he actually did say on several shows that the Palestinians actually have more rights than we actually give them credit for in Israel. And I learned that from you, Sasha. Is that not what you said several times, that they are actually reaching out to the Palestinian communities and giving them more rights than they have in the past and everything? And like I said, I learned this from you. And if I'm saying it wrong, correct me and everything. But I think that I heard you say that your research has showed that they have given the Palestinians more rights even within Israel.
Mark, I hope that you understood well what yesterday's guest said, Mr. Washington, on your show. And he said that there were a lot of people came to Israel from Tanzania, other African countries, and they were giving citizenship and all rights the same as Israel. And by the way, in Israel, there are 2 million Palestinians who are absolutely citizens of Israel. They work, they have a right to vote, they have medicine services. There's no difference between them and Israelis, whether they came 50 years ago or born there or whatever. It doesn't matter. Is my reply correct, Marco?
You're laughing because I didn't hear what you said.
I'm laughing at something I said to Kim. I'm backstage. What do you mean I'm laughing? I muted myself.
Oh, I thought you were trying to speak. No,
sorry. I said something to Kim that was totally not to be broadcasted.
No problem. Just really quickly, because we've been going over
in the honor of Travis.
Just really quickly. I still want to come back to Sasha, because Jacoby said it was a good idea. So Sasha, should the IDF and would they benefit from employing Hamas?
You should
Because that's
see
the
what
most
Travis.
absurd thing that I think I've ever said in jest or otherwise.
I've
on
never
this network.
said
And you
Hamas.
said he agreed
I
with me.
never said
Okay,
Hamas.
Palestinians. Should the IDF employ Palestinians?
You know, one little fact you
I don't
guys
know
know
what
about
that
Let
is.
Sasha respond. I really want to hear Sasha.
What is your
respond.
question, though?
Well, according to you, diversity is great. I was taking the piss by suggesting that if that's the case, the IDF should employ Palestinians. You said you agree with me. I want to hear what Sasha's going to say. Sasha, should the IDF
Again, wait. Let's get this correct. But you didn't quote me correctly. You didn't quote me correctly, Shaq. Shaq, remember, listen, we had this discussion earlier. Remember, if you did not quote me correctly, I can correct you. If you did you quote me correctly? No. So therefore, I can correct you. That's what you said earlier.
You've corrected me. You've corrected me.
What did I correct it to?
Let Sasha respond.
What did I correct it to?
Shaq, can I have your question one more time?
Sasha, I was being a smartass, and I said, if diversity is such a great idea, and Jatovi was talking about how employing people in the US military, there's been studies on it, is going to help, especially when, you know, they're going to other countries. It helps if you've got somebody who understands the culture, that understands the language, etc. So I said to him, so based on that, the IDF would be better off not employing, you know, Jewish people and Israelis. They should actually employ Palestinians, and even perhaps some Hamas people should join the IDF. That's what they should be doing for recruiting. And I was laughing because it sounded so absurd. And Jatovi's first comment afterwards, and if you don't think that that's what you said, Jatovi, we should perhaps replay the tape after we get off air. Jatovi said, well, actually, that's not such a bad idea. I just want to get your opinion.
No, Shaq, again, you're misquoting me. And you're laughing about it.
And everything. I'm gonna actually clean it up a little bit.
Laughing about it because it's ridiculous.
I'm gonna clean it up a little bit.
This is why diversity. If you don't believe that, Jatovi, then clearly diversity isn't such a strength, is it?
Incorrect.
What I heard him say, and I'm gonna give a specific example. There was a time, and I don't always bring it up, but I'll bring it up this time. My dad was actually in the Air Force. My dad served in Turkey. My dad actually understood some languages, including some of the Slavic languages. So because he understood those languages, he was able to translate, which is what the point that I think Jatovi was trying to make, is that there might be people from those cultures that can translate better. My dad had never been of that descent, but he did learn the language quite adequately and everything. So he was able to actually figure out what people were saying across the other side of the wall because he was able to decode the language and all in that space. So I think that that's where Jatovi was going, that there might be people from those cultures that understand it better. And there have been people even in wars that have come from different communities that understand those communities better. And I think that that's where Jatovi was going and everything. But if I'm wrong, correct me. But I'm just giving you my personal experience based on my dad. And I know for a fact that he served in the military in the late 50s, early 60s, and he was able to translate.
Look, again, I was the one that brought it up, so you can't tell me where Jatovi was going because I'm the one that brought it up, and then he responded to it. The question was to Sasha. It's a facetious, ridiculous question in the first place. I'm just trying to highlight the absurdity of the argument. But
the argument is that's what you're missing. It's not
the case.
You're not listening. You're trying to make a joke and be funny, but you're not listening, and you're misquoting me to try and make a joke about it.
Jatovi,
that's the problem.
Jatovi, hold up. If what is being said is really correct, then you would, because it sounds absurd. That's why I'm trying to point it out. If what you're saying is correct, then we should be advocating for people from Iceland and Greenland and Norway to go and move to sub-Saharan Africa. If what you're saying is correct, then the IDF would be better off employing Palestinians.
But the problem that the joke that you're trying to make is wrong because they're doing that.
Jatovi.
The joke that you're trying to make is what they are actually doing.
I've already repeated myself several times now.
And I've corrected you, but you keep going back to the lie.
Will you just shut up for a second? I've already conceded
where
to
it's
you.
Pointing out the fact
that
is going on.
That you claim that you didn't say that.
That is happening.
Jatovi, can you just let me finish the sentence? Okay. I've already conceded to you that you claim that that's not what you said. I made a very ridiculous, absurd, and facetious comment and directed it straight at Sasha. And that was ages ago. And Sasha still hasn't had a chance to respond to it. So, Jacoby, give him a chance. Give him a chance to respond to it, because the question isn't really about Israel. The question's about diversity. Jatovi,
you're misquoting.
The question isn't really about Israel. The question's about diversity. Let Sasha respond to it. He's been patiently waiting
so
there.
Go to that diversity question. And also, just to point out a fact.
Or not, just don't give Sasha a chance. Thanks for being here, Sasha. You're a pretty face.
All these jokes that you're trying to make, the U.S. military is reaching out to these individual places. The IDF actually utilizes people from Palestine to help them in this war. So therefore, these jokes that you're making, I don't get the joke. That's what they're doing. I don't understand the joke. They're doing that.
So does the I don't know the answer. I don't know the question, but I do want to hear from Sasha and everything. Does the IDF sometimes get people that are from those countries
and just give Sasha a chance to speak?
Yes.
Let's everybody just be quiet for a second and let Sasha say something.
Sasha.
Okay, I'll say something. If we are talking about diversity, I don't understand why. To understand that, you really have to mix up IDF and Palestinians and all that stuff. There is a much better example of diversity is that in our discussions now for several days in a row, if not longer, we have two polarized positions. One position is that Israel is responsible for saving as many Palestinians' lives as possible, stop its aggression, work towards two-state solution, and all other wonderful things. Now, my position was that Israel has a right to defend itself, and as a result of it, it has to completely the threat from Hamas.
There it goes.
To do that, it has to completely destroy Hamas as soon as possible, trying to save as many lives as Palestinians as possible, try to relieve the hostages. Hopefully it's underway. And that is what diversity is. We are on the same program, but we have different opinions. What's the solution to this problem? And instead of dealing with that and reality, whether it's discussing history of the conflict, discussing the real situation, real time, what's exactly happened on October 7th, that no Arab countries absolutely blamed the Hamas for doing that. All these ugly demonstrations in the West immediately follow the October 7th. Israel hasn't even done anything yet, but there were demonstrations and uprisings that Israel is aggressor and we have to defend Palestinians and all that stuff. All this on campuses, both in Canada and United States, many other countries, is that Jews couldn't even attend the schools and they have to hide. And I think that in the near future, Jews will be forced either to move to Israel or they will have to hide their identities. They have to change their names to Johnson and Carlson and some other English-sounding names and completely forget who they are, where they came from, and their children will have to be brought up where they don't even know that they are Jews. This is what lying ahead. And that what happened when the Jews left Russia, Poland, Eastern Europe, because there was such an anti-Semitism that they couldn't live there as Jews. Now it's happening here in the West.
I was actually just looking up an article, and I don't know that Shaquille would agree, but I hear what you're saying, because there are some people that blame the Arab community for not coming out and everything. And there was an article, because apparently they are meeting now and everything, where they were blaming some of the West, and there are some people that are saying that it is a double standard that they are practicing, because they actually used the argument, and I've heard this argument before, around the parallels between Ukraine and between the situation in Israel, because there are some that would argue that they are taking a stance of defending those that want liberty in the sense of Ukraine and not doing the same for the folks that are wanting that in Palestine. And I think that that's the argument I've heard from some of my friends that are Muslim background and of some of the Arab backgrounds as well and everything. And like I said, we can agree to disagree and all in that space.
Where is there, other than in Dubai, or rephrase that, other than in the UAE, where is there freedom in the Arab nations?
Depends on your definitions of freedom. And like I said,
what's your definition then? What's your definition of freedom?
I mean, like I've heard Adam say that there are some dictators that can be benevolent, and I've heard that there are some benevolent dictatorships even in some of the Arab countries and everything.
I completely agree with that.
So benevolent dictators aside, based on, I'm not even going to ask you what your definition of liberty is, but based on whatever definition of liberty you have, where in the Middle East?
I've never been to Morocco, but hold on a second. You asked me a question, like you did to Toby. I've never been to Morocco, but I know Coco McMillan, who does a show here, has a business partner in Morocco. I've got friends that have businesses in Algeria. I've got friends that have visited Qatar and a number of the other Arab countries, and they have told me that they were treated like royalty. And some of these are musicians. Some of these are people.
I'm treated like a king when I go to Africa. I have a full police escort, and I get to meet with the presidents and of the countries. But that doesn't mean that when I'm in Africa, they say to me, what do you think we should do to improve the place? I say nothing because you're treating me so well. What's that got to do with anything? I have businesses in countries that I would be very unlikely to live in. That's not an argument. Back to my question. Based on your definition, without me even asking what that definition is, based on your definition of liberty, where in the Middle East do you believe fits the criteria of liberty based on your definition of it?
I mean, first off, unless I go to the countries, unless I talk to people that are from those countries, I can only go by secondhand knowledge and knowledge of those people that I know that live in those areas. I just named some countries. I've not been to Morocco. I've not been to Algeria. I just said that. But I said that I've heard positive things about those countries.
This comment that's made about benevolent dictators, I remember this, and look, I don't really care whether people like or don't like Donald Trump. Sasha Starr doesn't like Donald Trump, whatever. I look at his policies. But I remember being told that he was a dictator. He was a dictator-like man. I went, but hang on, isn't he like basically like a free market capitalist kind of guy? He's like, yes, he is, and he's a dictator. Like, is that a thing now, a free market capitalist dictator? Like somebody who's like going to dictate, you must have your freedom. I will impose freedom on you against your will. I mean, what's sort of ridiculous?
But Shaquille, ironically, that's the conversation I had with Mr. Kenny Tai, and I brought that up on the World Edition earlier today, and that was the interview. You can go back and watch it later on because I'm re-airing it later on this evening. But I told you, he has Gizmo Spring. He is a Taiwanese immigrant and everything, and there were parts of that free market that he was saying that he didn't get to experience as much in China, but he's just been very successful in his business. The business has been there for 15 years. They built a lot of these specialty items like AirPods and a number of other things, and he's had this company for a number of years, a young Asian gentleman that is free market. But even when he went to China, and I've had friends that have visited China, they have told me that it is more free market than we expect and everything. Now, I've not been to China, but both of my parents have at some point in their life, even though that might have been 2 or 3 decades ago, the last time that they went. But I can only speak from what they have shared with me, that there is a number of free market things, even in these countries that we call socialistic or communistic or some of these other terms that we use and everything. I can only go by what my friends' experiences are, because I've even said on this show several times that I've not done enough international travel. I'm very any and everything, and I'd like to get that out of my system. That hopefully I get to come to Australia and visit you and get to other places as well. But I know my weaknesses. I've not gone there, but I can only go by what I learn from what people tell me.
This is a really interesting conversation.
The United States was very, very pleased to go to the United States.
Let me drop this nugget of joy in.
To North Korea, but I'm a little bit hesitant to go to North Korea. So, come on. Like, you must
drop this nugget of joy in here. Let me drop this nugget of joy in for you, okay? So Mark and I both agree that in terms of traveling, we get to learn about different places and become more educated on those areas. Now, I think we all can agree that it's good to learn these other places. Like if we were to travel and we could be more enlightened if we were in
Israel and we can understand that conflict better. That is a true statement. And if you fight against that or say anything against that, you're being very disingenuous. Now, you know what that education is? There's a key word that we used already. Our buzzword is diversity. So yes, diversity leads to education. You can laugh all you want, but you just argued for, hey, we need to become more educated. You know how you become more educated? Being diverse.
Your beautiful country that I respect immensely has fallen to, what is it, 25th, 27th or something in educational standards. You've got a D. You got a D in education. Yep. There was a study done. Most Americans don't know where Utah is, right? And then you want to start talking about international countries.
But Shaquille, I brought up one of our guests that we got a D in infant mortality.
Everything else in the bloody world.
But Shaquille, I brought up that we got a D in infant mortality. But part of that D in infant mortality has to deal with the way that certain ethnicities are treated as well. And I brought that up on a past show. We went into a whole discussion around that, and that's the way that the medical treatment is done and everything. And they even brought up some of Toby's background, because when we got into this conversation, that's where I brought up his wife was a neonatal nurse and has some knowledge.
So you guys are amongst the more educated guys.
Shaq, right? Are you arguing against education? Shaq, are you arguing against education?
I'm not. No, not at all.
So you're saying that being educated, if you can, education helps you learn and become a stronger person, correct?
I wouldn't go quite so far as to say that.
So you're arguing against education. Education doesn't help people.
I'm not arguing against
which education. Is it? Does education help or does education hurt?
I'm not going to play the question game. Just
level, you know you're wrong.
Just level the accusation at me and then I'll respond to it.
It doesn't matter.
Level the accusation at me and I'll respond to it. If you're not going to do that, I'll ask you this. You guys are the great big educated people. You're very educated, according to you. Very educated. You can weigh in on what Israel should do. That's how well educated you are on foreign affairs. I'm just going to ask you, without googling it.
I just pointed out to you.
What is the capital?
If we were there, we would understand more.
Just hold your horses. What is the capital of? We'll go with New England. I'll give you an easy one. New England, Louisiana, and Rhode Island. Come on, let's hear it. Quick.
Okay. So just to point out.
What are they? Oh, no answer. No, you can change the topic. You can change the topic. Probably because you don't know. So if you're going to sit there, you don't even know the capitals of states in your own country. You're going to lecture the rest of us about international affairs.
You told me. I mean, Shaquille, hold on a second. So, I can answer. What were those countries? What were those states?
No, you've had time to Google it now, Mark.
No, not even Googling. But what were the states that you just said? You said New England.
I can hear somebody typing. I mean, come on.
I'm not typing at all. You said New England.
If you asked me what the capital of Victoria is, I'd have answered you straight away.
New England.
So clearly, if you guys want to try and weigh in on international issues and act like you know it,
you're proving my point. You're proving my point.
Louisiana, Providence, Rhode Island, and New England, by the way, is actually several regions and everything, which is actually your premise was wrong, because New England is actually not a state in of itself. New England, Maine, and others are part of New England. So that was a wrong. So
I'm glad you picked that up. It took you a while, didn't it?
No, and then I knew it from the beginning. I knew it from the beginning. So that's why I was going there. So I gave you the two and everything. And no, I did not look it up.
But Shaq, the thing is, you're proving my point by asking all these questions. And the more you ask, okay, well, you're not as educated. Well, that means being educated makes you a stronger person. And through education, you get a lot of education through experiences. Shaq, you can try and overtalk me and everything, but everything you say is moot at this point because the argument is over. It's done.
But I have a question for you.
If you are correct that education makes you a stronger person, if that's correct, then why do so many of your competitor allied countries, not the competitors like China and Japan, allied countries, why have so many of them introduced plans where if high school students are not interested in academics, they can leave early and go and do a trade, right? Something that America should actually think about introducing. Why would that be the case? What you should do is say, oh, no, look, if you go be a bricklayer, you're going to be a weaker person. You need to go and study
Shaquille, back up.
physics or something. Because that way you're going to be stronger.
Shaquille,
If that's the
back up. Hold on,
argument.
Shaquille, back
It's
up.
just
I've
like
heard
education
both.
makes some people stronger.
Just
and makes
making
other
up stuff to
people
try and
back up,
making it all up.
And I got Kim here to testify and witness with me. I've heard several people on shows, including myself, that have said that we have done a disservice. And Adam, you know that I've said it because I've even said it on this show, that we've done a disservice by not encouraging people to go into the vocations and everything. So that is an argument that is not a true argument, because I've said that on several shows and with several interviews, both those that I've done on World Edition and World Politics, as well as those that you may not watch all of my shows. So I brought it up a number of times because I've even said that I had an uncle who unfortunately passed away about a year ago that was actually at a plumbing.
Right, but you changed the goalpost. The comment made was that education makes people stronger. It makes some people who are likely to benefit from that
The
education
most
stronger.
interesting part.
It doesn't make other people who aren't going to benefit from it stronger.
Interesting part about this whole thing, talking about those vocations that people should go into. You know what you got to be in those vocations? If you want to be a plumber, you got to be educated in plumbing. Everywhere you go, education matters. So you've got to learn new things. So no matter how much you try to run from it, Shaq, you are wrong. You have lost this whole discussion, but you are trying your best.
Well, in the U.S., you have to be licensed.
There's no sweat on my brow, my friend. There's no sweat on my brow. Look at that. So that tissue's as dry as your skin, my friend.
For those of you who are too highly educated and rich to know, in the U.S., you have to be educated and plumber, electricians, anything, masonry work. If you want to, lay the concrete in my front yard for a sidewalk, you cannot just hire anyone. And then they do come and inspect your work and the house. So, they have inspectors that are hired to look at the work. They check the insurance and the licenses of the people who do the work. It is very expensive to become, even a mechanic. Oh my God, to become a mechanic and work in the garages around here is insane. The amount of money you pay to become educated to work on the cars around here. You just can't go tinker on a car anymore. You can't just have a damn solar panel installed on your house without paying Duke Power $80,000 to have it installed on your house. And I have one that cost me a couple of $1,000 that I know I can put on to run my whole house, but Duke says I need to pay them $80,000. So everything is about what? Money.
So let me come back at you with this question then, right? If education is so important, it makes you stronger, makes you wiser, is something that's going to help you to navigate through life.
Enslaves you.
Right? Okay. If education is going to do that for you, would you guys then agree? Because before we had women's suffrage, you didn't have universal suffrage, right? Suffrage was only available to certain parts of the community. Should we then say, look, if you're not educated highly enough, sorry, champ, you don't get a vote because you're an idiot?
Nope.
Well, that's what Adam's been trying to push for a while now.
Why not? Why do we want uneducated morons voting?
Thank you.
They're weaker people.
I am against the right to vote.
I can actually answer that easy. I can answer that.
Careful, you're back in Georgia. Careful with that comment.
That history around any of the voting stuff that you're talking about, the uneducated, that means you got to throw in an arbiter to figure out who's educated or not. And if that arbiter turns out to be like they did in our own history, that idea comes from white supremacist ideology.
Let's leave the race issue. Let's leave the race issue aside. Let's say it doesn't apply to people who are black. Okay, let's talk about all those toothless deplorables, right? All the hillbillies and trailer park trash white people from Little Rock, Arkansas. Let's go with those people.
Take away their voting rights.
Do you think that they should not be able to vote unless they can prove?
I think they should be able to vote. I think they should be able to vote.
But why, Jatovi?
Because there is no basis to block somebody's vote based on their education alone. So there's nothing there. There's no reason to tell somebody just because you don't believe what I do, because you're not as educated as I am, that you cannot vote. That is a root, that the roots of that idea comes from racism.
Well, no,
And
why don't we force them?
it does. Historically, Adam, you know for a fact it
Hold on a
does.
second. Hold on a second. Firstly,
Yes, you're correct.
Firstly, let me just say, if what you're saying is correct, well, you should force them to get an education. We'll pay for it. But secondly, it comes from racism, really, because the white British aristocrats did that in Britain well before there were blacks in America. Okay, they wouldn't let the lower classes. They wouldn't let the lower classes vote. This is the truth across most of Europe.
Shaq, this is the problem with your argument, which is the same thing that you try to ask Sasha a crazy question. The history behind it, even Adam agreed with the history behind it. So to point out and to run down this crazy road to try and pigeonhole it to something that you can actually agree with, it doesn't work. The history on that actual topic came from there. So therefore, don't even try and push it down to create some unreal idea just to make yourself feel better. That little pin patter in your heart, it doesn't work. You were wrong before about education. Now you're wrong about
feeling better. It's not about me feeling better. It's about me pointing out how absurd your argument is. But
the argument is that there is no basis to justify taking away somebody's vote based on education.
When you bring race into
it, there's no basis into it. There's no basis. I told you where the history is.
You said that. Let me finish my sentence. You said it. There's no basis. No basis. No basis. Let me finish.
Then why are you continually pushing something that is untrue?
Man, he's trying to make a point.
Let me finish. Let me respond to you. You brought race into it because I know that you Americans are so fixated on race, and you've totally ignored what I just said about in Britain, in England, the rich aristocrats did that. You're
doing exactly what I just said you were doing.
Most of Europe did that. Africa, the wealthiest Africans did that to other Africans. India, where I'm genetically from, did that to the lower castes. This has happened all throughout the world. So where's the race issue?
Have a good one, Sasha. He keeps ignoring the fact of the history, but it's okay.
No, the thing I was going to say is I've said this on other shows as well, and I've even brought this up to you, Shaquille, because one of the things that I brought up, I think I brought it up to Adam and everything, is I do think that there is a notion, and I think that we all can agree on this, and I was actually talking to one of my coworkers about this, that sometimes we are too busy letting other people dictate our viewpoints. Like there are a number of people that vote, and it even comes back to what Adam says, a number of people that will vote because they are too lazy to do the research for themselves and everything. So they will vote according to what the PAC or the organization tells them to vote. And I have a problem with that as well. So I definitely think that sometimes we need to encourage people to do critical thinking, so that if you are voting for a certain mayor, or you are voting for even something that some people might think is not that important, like a water commissioner, that you know why you are supporting that person, and not just because the People's Alliance, which is one of our PACs, told you to vote for that person. And there's a number of things, and I know that they do that in Australia and other places as well. So that's where I have a frustration sometimes, because I'm going like, you have to actually have some knowledge as to why you are voting for the people you're voting for. But I also get that sometimes we are naturally lazy, and there's a lot of candidates in some races, so you might not be able to research everybody as much as you would like to. But I do think that we as people can be very lazy.
I would add to that perhaps, especially in the United States of all countries, you should pay attention to the fact that you're a constitutional republic, which means that government action is supposed to be restrained by the Constitution and by your Bill of Rights. And I don't think it is in any way fair for the majority of voters to vote for things that would be illegal if they did it on their own, but get government to do their bidding for them. Yeah. And most notably, tax rates. The idea that you will tax the rich with exorbitant confiscatory tax rates in order to help the poor when the poor are in the majority, that is the same as if they formed a gang and went into your house and stole your stuff. Okay, sending a policeman or a tax inspector out to your house with the threat of a gun, you give us your money or else, is equally as abhorrent in my personal opinion. Adam, over to you.
Yeah, no, just very briefly, when it comes to the right to vote, basically, a good democracy depends on an informed citizenry. I am not going to allow the high school smoking jock, a weed smoking jock, the captain of the football team, or the captain of the cheerleading team, who's more concerned about being with the captain of the football team than knowing about any political candidates. I'm not going to allow some baseball player in rookie ball who throws 92 miles an hour but can't find the plate to vote. I'm not going to allow racists to vote, members of the KKK to vote. And when it comes to diversity, I'll give you one example, and this is really important. I read several months ago about how a few universities were having segregated housing by race. They were having all African Americans in some dorms and all whites and others. And initially I thought, that is a terrible thing to do. These are people who believe in diversity, but yet they're engaging in segregation. And then it dawned on me that sometimes that is a good thing, because when you don't share common values, people want to be around other people who they empathize with, who they have collective experiences with. And that's why I was saying, without an underlying set of common values, sometimes diversity can be harmful. And I don't see anything wrong with the black students, I think it was at Harvard or maybe it was Yale, I'm not sure, saying we want our own housing. Okay, I would say yes, because guess what? They identify with people of their race and their collective experiences. Now, is that the answer? Probably not, but it does reflect the lack of common values that we have in this country and the divisiveness that makes diversity lose its promise. And I hate to say that.
Just to point out, as you just stated, that you wouldn't want the high school football player to vote. Well, the average IQ of a football player is sitting at 105. The average IQ of a wrestler is sitting at 112. The average IQ of an ice hockey player. So this gets to my point. You may not think they're smart, but they're actually smart. So coming up with a justification to say,
they're smart with an IQ of 105.
But Jacoby, there was a show, I forget what show it was, where they asked people basic questions, and somebody thought Judge Judy was a member of the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, give me a break. You have these morons voting, you have racists voting, you have these bums voting.
I get all that, but
why do you support it? Why doesn't your vote count twice as much as their vote?
No, everybody's vote should count once, and everybody should be allowed to vote. It's not up to me to decide that, okay, well, this goes into the whole, racists shouldn't vote. Well, if we're all for the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, being able to say what you want to be able to say, that protects speech that we don't like, and that includes racist talk. The freedom of speech doesn't say the freedom of consequence of your speech. It just means that you can say whatever you want, and the actual government cannot punish you for saying that. So therefore, if you talk about the racists can't vote, well, the government then comes in and has to punish them and take their vote away. So that's antithetical to the First Amendment. So then,
I'm not a fan of the First Amendment.
If you say that, oh, well, the football player or the cheerleader isn't smart enough to vote, well, I just gave you the average IQ of these individuals. Well, the average IQ, it says the average score is 100. And 68% of all people score between 85 and 115. So that individual, if you base it on just the IQ scores, that individual is falling right into that.
I'm not basing it on the IQ score. I'm basing it on the knowledge.
And then if you go into the knowledge of politics, what if you go into, what if you're saying that, hey, I am big into computer science. I'm not big into geopolitics, or I'm not into civics and so on and so forth. So because I'm not big into that actual criteria that you created, then I'm punished, even though I could be the smartest person in the room.
Do you think Elena Kagan's vote should matter the same as a KKK member? And as far as the First Amendment goes, I am not a fan of the First Amendment. I do not believe we should be allowing racist speech. I think we should be allowing people to sue for racist slurs. And Snyder versus Phelps was wrong. We have two, and Citizens United, it represented a terrible interpretation, terribly expansive interpretation of the First Amendment. I believe in responsible speech, not disgusting speech.
We can all believe in
let me jump in. At some point, let me jump in here. Let me jump in. Come on. Adam, if that's how you feel, have a look at some of those countries that have tried to do exactly what you're saying in relation to curtailing speech. Now, after I get over Jacoby saying how intelligent people with 100 IQs are, let me ask you a question here.
What's your IQ?
You have no problem.
What's your IQ?
I'm not going to tell you.
You're just
know.
insulting people
Let me tell
saying
you.
that the 100 IQ is just garbage. Then what's yours?
I didn't say it was garbage, but it's not exactly high, Jatovi.
What's
Now,
I
Adam,
just
let me
gave
ask
you
you,
what
can I-
it sits right
Go
in the
for it.
average
Go for it.
range.
You go for it. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, I'll go for it then. Don't
You let me know when it's my turn. No problems.
I'll let you know when it's your turn then.
Yeah,
Don't
okay.
insult people that you don't know. Don't sit there and tell somebody that they're not that smart, even though you have no clue if they are or not. Yes, I said the IQ level, but that doesn't, you don't even know the individuals who have that IQ level. We don't know yours. So you could be sitting at a 95 or even below, but we don't know.
Have you ever been to Indiana?
Okay, that's
So
it for
again,
Jatovi.
the
Thank
point
you.
is, I
Thank you
said
for
I
sharing.
would tell you when it's your turn.
If I
You
can
asked
come
me
back
to
to my
tell you when
question
it's
to
your
Adam.
turn.
Yeah,
So
hold a second. Hold a second.
Oh, now
hold
I'm
a
going to wait my
second.
turn. Okay, all right.
No,
Well,
hold
I
a
was going
second.
to ask
Hold a
Adam
second.
a
I was
question,
going to
but
come to
okay,
Shaquille.
yeah, no problem.
No, Shaquille, I was going to come to you. And by the way, I
Okay,
do know
thank you.
because he did reveal it one time. If I remember correctly, he's actually.
Don't say it on air. Don't say it on air.
Oh,
I
but you
told
just
what it was
insulted
off
everybody
air.
else, but you don't want to say it on air? Okay.
I told you what it
gotcha.
was off
Put
air.
it in the back. Put it in
Don't
the, put
say
it in
what
the
it
chat.
is. I'm not going to
Put
tell
it
you.
in the chat. Put
I'm
it
not
in the
going to tell
chat,
you,
big guy.
David. It's not something that's supposed to be said on air.
I am
either.
not allowing the meth head from Southern Indiana to vote, period,
Yeah,
or
oh,
speak
yeah,
for that
Adam,
matter.
Oh
Adam,
no, I
let
can
me just
insult
ask
people
you a
with
question
100
in relation
IQ, but I don't want people to know mine. Oh.
No, what were you
What's
going to
the
say,
question?
Shaquille? You had a question for Adam.
Are we sure?
Yeah.
Adam, you made comment that you support that if people, I think you said black people want to have their own segregated housing, I assume that would also apply if they wanted to have their own segregated graduations. Let me ask you, and I actually don't know the answer to this. I haven't been able to get an answer. What if it's a person who's black or otherwise off color who doesn't want to participate in that segregated graduation, for example? Are they allowed to attend the other one? See, this is some of the damage that gets done because when you're expected, because you're part of a group, you're expected by other people in that group and people outside of that group to only participate in a particular thing, right? And you don't want to, what do you do? And
Okay.
I've been in a similar situation myself, and you know what I did? I didn't go. I didn't go at all because
Right.
I didn't want to be grouped in. I also didn't want to be, the rebel with a whole heap of people that weren't my group. This would be my fear for those people who are off color in America, who are told they're supposed to go to a graduation only with people of their color. Okay. Those people that are like, wait, I don't believe in that. And Georgia, for example, and somebody can fact check with this, but I believe that Georgia was the place that actually had the highest rate of mixed genders, mixed race people. Okay, where they had a black parent and a white parent. And my understanding of Georgian history is that a lot of the other states where this happened, those mixed race people actually moved to Georgia so they wouldn't get picked on.
Okay,
Those kids are going to grow up. Those kids grow up, and I know many mixed race Georgians. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to sit there and go, well, what? I hate the white side of my family, or I only love the black side. This is a really confusing, hard issue, and it's something that really, really hurts so many young people and older people. So what
I'll
I
answer it.
No. The question was to Adam, not to you, Jatovi, not to you, Mark. With all due respect, the question was to Adam.
So my answer to your question is I do not support segregated
Segregated
graduation ceremonies or segregated housing. I was making that point only to say that the people who claim to be all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, when they are doing this, they're actually embracing precisely the opposite. And I could understand why they're doing it and why diversity in some instances may not be helpful. So it was more of an observation rather than an opinion. I do not agree that they should be segregated for precisely the problem that you identified.
If you believe in homogeny, then you believe in segregation. Because as you just pointed out, Shaq, the individual, you didn't want to go to your graduation because you had all these people that had this one viewpoint.
Similar situation, wasn't a graduation, but a similar.
Okay, where you went to this, you didn't want to go, you didn't want to be the oddball. Well, the oddball is that diversity, is that diverse individual that has a different train of thought. So you didn't want to fall into that homogenous behavior. So again, when you can't have it both ways. You can't say we need homogeny, so we need integration.
Integration in itself is diversity. If you're arguing for
That's my point.
segregation, so you're arguing for
that's my point.
segregation.
That's Adam's point.
The diversity people are the segregationists now.
No, they're not. You're not listening to what I just stated.
So wait a minute. Part of the conversation is assimilation versus the opposite of assimilation. I can't think of the word right now and everything.
Who's
But that's part of
authorizing
the conversation and everything.
segregation
But hold
ceremonies?
on a second, Adam, because one of the things that I have
homogeneous.
said several times
argument.
and all along those lines, and y'all can disagree or disagree. I'm gonna bring up something that I've never brought up on the show, but I chose not to. There are members of my family that are very active in what we call black frats and black sororities and everything along those lines. And I was recruited by a number of them, but I chose because of some of the hazing that I didn't feel that it was comfortable in that. But that was my choice and everything. I could have easily gone into become a Kappa or a Q or some of these other ones that sometimes they say is a social leg up, because that's part of the reason that you join those things is it's supposed to help you in terms of some of the network and everything. But there were things that I didn't like about those organizations. So I chose not to, as a young man, to get involved in them. But I don't knock my friends that chose to go for them and everything. So there are times that you can make these choices and everything. And I'll just come back. And I think I've talked to you about this, Shaquille. Definitely, I've talked to Kim and to Jatobia about this. And I think Nick, I don't know if I've brought it up to you, Adam, and everything. But I have family members that I primarily identify as African American and everything, but there is no doubt anybody can look at my skin complexion and know that there are other things that are part of my heritage, whether that is European or whether that is Native American. I have some family members that literally only identify by their Native American. They are totally into the powwow culture. They are totally into that culture. I do not knock them if that's the way that they want to identify, because that's that whole thing around self-identity and everything. If my cousin Verna wants to be primarily, and I think I showed you a picture one time where Shaquille, if she wants to be primarily identified as Native American and everything, I'm not going to argue with her that I think that she has other things in her heritage if that's the way she wants to identify.
If I want to primarily identify as somebody from New Jersey, right? Adam Lamparello is going to go, okay, look, Shaq, you know, like, you've lived in America for a few years now, man, but you're not from New Jersey. Like, it's like, you know, and even if you were, right, like, take affirmative action is one of the issues that we keep bringing up, right? There are people in my family, direct ascendants up from me that have benefited from this. However, I don't want it for me. Right? Why? Because they went through all the horrible stuff so that I didn't have to. So now I live in Australia, and yeah, I'm different. When I travel overseas, I'm different because I have an accent that most people, by looking at me, aren't expecting. Okay? So when somebody comes up to me, or a little kid comes up to me in the airport and goes, hey, you sound really funny, you're cool. Okay, I'm not going to get offended. You know, when somebody says to me, well, where you're from, I don't think they're otherizing me and trying to imply I don't belong there. I just go, yeah, cool. Of course I'm different. That's awesome, right? I don't know why everybody wants to get, you know, so caught up in all these things, and it's mostly stemming from America and is now permeating around the rest of the world. And I just don't think the majority of people feel this way. I think it's a very small group of people. Like Kim, you were on the election coverage that we had where we did both the referendum in Australia and the New Zealand's election. And what did we see? It's very, very similar dynamic to what you're seeing in the United States, Canada, and elsewhere. The inner cities are voting one way, and the rest of the country is voting a different way. And I think it's quite time for people and those inner city companies to lecture the rest of the country about how morally bankrupt they are. It's just not true. People are just trying to live their lives and get on. People are going to have different opinions, and not every disagreement is based on hate. Not every joke that could be taken the wrong way, but could also be taken as a joke, is intended to be an insult or is intended to make you feel lesser than. Okay? It's just not the case. I went to Walmart. I'll just give you one more example. I went to Walmart in America. It wasn't even Walmart. It was Whole Foods, actually. I was in California. Without thinking, I went to the right-hand side of the line because that's where the back of the line is. And then I was like, oh, and everyone was looking at me. Nobody said anything. All the Americans were just looking at me. And then I realized I'd pushed in. I'd pushed to the front of the line. And then I looked at him and said, oh, I'm so sorry, guys. You know, you Americans, you drive on the wrong side of the road. That's why I got confused. I'll go to the other end and get to the back of the line. Okay? It wasn't a big deal. The Americans weren't being racist. I wasn't being racist against the Americans. It was just something that happened. It was funny. Everyone laughed. It was fine. There was no big deal. But because of how highly strung everybody is. Little tiny instances that would have been laughed off just 5 or 10 years ago are now being turned into something bigger than Ben-Hur. And based on what? Race, gender, or who you like to sleep with and how you like to sleep with them.
Agreed.
Come on now. Give it a
But
break.
no, that's what you want to say something to Toby, but I can't say that it's something new because literally I am the person that is in my 60s, and I literally remember when I was in college. So we're talking the 80s and everything. I got invited by a friend of mine who was Hispanic American and everything. There was another friend of mine. I've lost touch with all of these friends, by the way, and everything that was Polish American. And when I stepped into the room and realized that it was not comfortable for me for whatever reason, because they decided that their idea of what they were calling a manly night, yeah, you got to love that, Kim. That's literally what they were calling it, was a manly night, was to sit there, a bunch of dudes that are between, let's say, 19 and 22 or 23 and everything, and to watch a porn movie with their friends and to tell racist jokes, because I think I heard the Oreo joke, I heard the taco joke to my Mexican friend, and I heard some other jokes and everything. I was like, I'm out. I'm sorry. Like I said, you might have been jumping into it and everything and enjoying it, but for me, I was like, I'm out. I was not feeling it.
The issue isn't you being out. The issue is you telling me that I must be out because you're offended. If I'm not, let me go and hang with those people and watch the porn.
So as a
and have the
person,
racist jokes.
as a person who does comedy and speaks with roughly millions every year, legitimately,
I know you do comedy, Jatobi. I think we're all aware of that.
Yeah, I know. So just to point out, as you're talking about people are upset at particular things, it's a matter of becoming educated to what how the world is evolving and how people are beginning to understand and being able to express themselves, because a lot of the individuals that couldn't speak up before now have the ability to speak. And what do we do? Just ignore them? No, we've got to be able to incorporate them. So when you actually tell a joke or have to speak with people and actually have those giant crowds that have to listen to you every night, you have to understand that you cannot say particular things. Because what is said yesterday, yeah, sure, it may be a little bit more offensive today. For example, the whole "Let's Go Brandon" chant. You don't realize how many times people try and want to say that at particular sporting events because they think it's funny, but it's not. It offends many people. Yeah, it may not offend you or may not offend this person, but it offends a ton. So being cognizant and being understanding to these things is not a negative. It's actually improving society, allowing us to grow together. Because if you turn away and offend people, like the joke that you just told, that, oh, you were at Walmart and told this joke. No, that involved everybody. That brought everybody in.
Yeah, but we're creating snowflakes.
If you dropped in something that was technically offensive that you may not have known, how you could have said something in that is okay in Australia, but not okay in the US because the terminology or the actual cultural differences, and somebody picks up on that, there's where their education comes into play, because you've got to know your audience that you're talking to. And if it's a matter...
No, we're Australian, right? We find it quite amusing how you guys, the most powerful, richest, wealthiest people that ever lived with the most amount of freedom, get so upset and uptight over the most minuscule things. If we told you the jokes that we tell about Americans in Australia, you'd be horrified. If we told you the jokes that we tell about New Zealanders, that New Zealanders piss themselves laughing at and then throw it back at us, if we did that in America, you you would like have some sort of...
And you do realize that one of the things out of Australia was...
I actually want to tease Jacoby about something. You say that I never teased Jacoby, but I actually want to tease Jacoby about something.
Diversity in your military.
You're not listening.
You start talking about the diversity in your military, and you start talking about LGBTQ, and with a real emphasis on the T bit of that. Okay, when you have 20-something-year-olds in America,
it's the way the consonant comes out of the mouth.
Having meltdowns because they've been mispronounced, and then they've got to go to their cry closets and their safe spaces and all this sort of stuff. And then you expect the rest of the world to go, oh, thank goodness America's in charge because they can come out there
know
with an
what- I don't know what you're talking
AK-47.
about.
But
I don't know
this
what you're
just
talking
only
about.
pray
The
that the
minority-
enemy doesn't
You
mispronounce.
were wrong
Come
about
on.
you're wrong about diversity again. You're wrong.
Oh, of course
again,
I am.
education.
Yeah, of course
We've
I
already
am.
proven that you were wrong about
Jacoby,
education.
hold on a
and
second,
being able to
Jacoby.
relate
I want
people.
to
I'm
teach
not
you
sure
about
where
the
that
one
phrase
second,
was.
Jacoby,
And as you said,
Jacoby and Shaquille. Hold on a second, because I want to actually teach you about something, and I don't know your answer, and literally, I do not know your answer and everything. But there are some people, because there is a major event that goes on at the Bulls game regularly, that some people may find it offensive, and I don't know that people find it
actually,
offensive.
Mark,
Everything.
instead
But
of
one of the main
bringing-
things that y'all do at a game is y'all do the sumo wrestling and everything, and all
Instead of
along those
bringing
lines. So
that-
my question is, how does that play into the conversation around diversity?
Instead of even talking about the baseball and those traditional in-game promotions, which yes, it is offensive to some people,
Right.
and yes, it is culture. Like even when I bet you when for the most part, Team USA doesn't really do sumo wrestling because they are afraid that they know that it offends some culture, so they won't do it when those games are played. So we don't even have to talk about that when you can talk about how right now, in terms of speaking up, we should understand the plight of the Native American, and the Native Americans right now are having a plight and trying to push back on the name Thanksgiving because of the fact that Thanksgiving was built on the genocide of the Native American people. So therefore, they're trying to push back and get that education out there, which should be done. It should be an understanding and learning about individuals.
I'm gonna
In the
risk
same
our-
way, the Eskimo,
Adam, I'm gonna
Eskimo
risk our
is
friendship
offensive
here,
to
okay?
those Inuit
The-
people.
Which-
and
the
that's
other day-
put out there.
I
So
wanna-
it's
Adam, the other day,
I wanna
thought
add
I'd
to
have a crack
Jacoby-
at making my own pasta, and I got
Shaq, let's hear from-
all the
we've talked a
flour,
lot.
I
Let's
got
hear from Kim.
everything, and I actually
Let's
put
hear from
an egg
Kim.
in it because it was easier
Kim
for
is
me
being
to do.
quiet, and
Are
she's
you
been quiet the
offended
whole
that
time,
I've
and I would love to hear what she
appropriated
has to say.
Italian culture?
No.
Are we no longer friends because of it? I mean, this
Can't
is
talk
the sort
around
of
that.
Shaq, we know that you don't
that
find
goes on with
anything offensive. You find nothing at all
I-
offensive.
I-
Even the
I
fact that
find
the Catholic
Thanksgiving
Church
It's called,
has many
I
child
don't
abuse
find very many
things.
things. I don't
So,
find
yeah.
many things.
There we go.
offensive,
So
Toby,
I
because
can
I've got a
push
thick
those
skin.
buttons.
Well,
and
here's
make
what
it
I'll
simple.
say.
Why?
I'm
Why
not
do
some
that?
little
Let's hear from
prissy
Kim.
princess.
Let's hear from
right,
Kim. Let's hear
your
from Kim.
website.
Let's hear from Kim.
Wait, you guys
Yeah.
can't talk
Well,
for
I
half
just
hour
think
straight
it's
and then say, "Oh, let's hear from somebody else." I mean, really,
I
come on,
find
the hypocrisy.
Thanksgiving offensive. I really do, and I agree with Jacoby. It's celebrated on the death of the genocide of the people who originated here in the U.S., which I find even more offensive when I talk to people who are like, "Oh, I'm for Israel because they were there forever." Well, you know, what about the Native American Indians? Okay, so as a descendant of that, which I know I don't look like, but hey, go look at real Cubans, right? They're blonde hair, blue eyes, the original ones. So we stereotype a certain way, but Thanksgiving isn't about celebrating the life of people. It's about people who came over and took away everything that belonged to somebody else. To me, I mean, I do it to be with my family, and they love getting together and cooking all of this food. But the true aspect of it, where it originated from, has no meaning to me whatsoever. What has a meaning to me is being able to be with my family, my loved ones, to be able to thank for all the blessings in my life, and to sit down and have a good meal with them. That's what I like about it. But the true meaning of it has nothing to do with what's in my
And see,
heart.
that's where the whole education comes into play, and being able to speak with people the same way that the whole Columbus Day is now changed to Indigenous Peoples Day, because Columbus didn't discover anything. I mean, there were actually people here already, so he discovered nothing. I mean, matter of fact, he landed on the wrong place. He landed on the wrong island. We're talking about history, Shaq. I understand that is not your strong suit.
Oh,
okay.
really? Well,
Yes.
see, I'm one of those uneducated people.
And as you stated that the people with 100 IQ really aren't that intelligent. Okay, so if you're saying that you have an 100 IQ, Okay, I apologize. We're not going to go down that path.
By
So
your
again,
own,
let's talk
by
about the
your
history.
own,
So
by
Columbus
your
Day,
own
throughout the
statement,
education,
100 is
throughout
the
education,
average
throughout
IQ, so
education,
clearly they're
throughout
not the
education, throughout
exceptional
education,
achievers
throughout
there.
education, throughout the
You're an
education
idiot.
of the actual history of that date. That means that's where we can learn and become to grow together. We can begin to grow together as a country and as a nation and work towards a actual value goal that you talk about, Adam, and be homogenous around a value goal, but champion and cheer on and celebrate where we came from and the cultures that we came from.
The problem is that that's not what's really happening in our society. The biggest threat to this country is coming from within, not without. We're creating a lot of young people who think they're victims. We're dividing people between oppressors.
You're telling them they're victims. I'm saying celebrate them.
Identity politics. It's disgusting, and we are eroding those common values by doing so. And I think,
we shouldn't celebrate cultures. We shouldn't celebrate where people come from.
No, I'm not saying that we shouldn't celebrate.
We shouldn't learn about where people come from.
We shouldn't be telling people that they're marginalized, that they're victims.
That it's a fact that
offends somebody is a microaggression.
You actually agree
that Christians are the oppressors. That all whites are.
You actually agree to
marginalization. Racism.
You actually pointed out, and we talked about this last time, Adam, how you even agreed that even early. What was it, earlier today, or no? I mean, yeah, actually, it was earlier today. How you even agreed that systemic racism is in our education system. And if you cannot start on the same plateau in that systemic racism, you know what? That if you start off with a bad base, that growth is not going to be equal on both sides. No matter how much you try and say it is the same at the time, if you know starting from the bottom, it is not.
I'll be right back.
I don't believe that systemic racism still exists. That's not what I said. What I said was that there are disparities in the educational system that affect African Americans.
So you're saying that there are disparities. So those disparities against African Americans, is that not the same as racism within a system?
No, because I don't believe that all disparity is the result of discrimination.
It's wrong. Minority population, and you're saying that is not racist. It's only affecting the black people.
No, it doesn't only affect black people. It affects white people too. Like in Southern Indiana, for example.
You said that there were disparities, and it was affecting the black community.
Disproportionately,
we know
disproportionately
that it doesn't
affecting the black community.
We know that it doesn't only affect black people.
Hold on for a second. Adam and I are having a good conversation.
African
we don't need you to chime
Africans
in.
that are born in America.
Stop.
So where's
Adam and I were
response to
talking. Jack, stop. So Adam, you agreed.
I'm going.
Here we go again. We're back. We just had a breakthrough earlier today when we talked. Can I finish talking to Adam and then I'll answer your question? Can I finish talking to Adam and then I'll answer your question? Can I finish talking to Adam and then I'll talk to your question? I can't even hear you now. So Adam, now you agree that there are racial disparities within the actual education system, racial disparities, and that is affecting the African American community. You've agreed
disproportionately, yes.
Disproportionately. That means it's having a detrimental effect to the African American community. You didn't say all communities. You just said disproportionately affecting the African American community.
It affects white and African American.
And now you're adding in more.
It affects black communities more.
Counselor, you literally just said that it is affecting, and no matter how many semantic words you try and change it, Counselor, you literally just said that it's disproportionately affecting the black community.
That's correct.
So if that is correct, and that is the African American community that we're talking about, a particular race or culture or a race. So if it's disproportionately affecting one race, is that not in itself racist?
No.
That is a description of what racism is.
No, because disparity is not always the result of intentional discrimination. I can still agree with you that the disparity is intolerable.
Disparity, correct? It is a description
result of a Supreme Court decision that has affected whites and blacks, but blacks disproportionately.
Counselor,
but that is not racism.
No matter how many times you keep saying it, it is disproportionately hurting a race.
So is our prison system?
Is that racial disparity? Is that racial disparity?
Racial disparity does not necessarily mean racial discrimination.
Is it racial disparity? Yes or no?
Yes.
It is racial disparity.
Sure.
So therefore,
So therefore, you want to go on this claim
Mark,
that
what do you
it's
think?
not an effect, it's not potentially done by
Well, it's
racism.
about time to wrap
Yes,
up
that
because
the
we got
intent
another 4 minutes
underlying
left.
it is not necessarily
However,
racist, which is
it-
why many
Put it on
poor
our
whites
heat cap.
suffer under the same system.
Is it disproportionately affecting whites?
Put on the think cap.
No, but I'm saying it's not the result of
Now it's
racism.
easier.
That's the difference. Disparity
again,
does not mean
You
discrimination.
are saying that it's disproportionately
Now
affecting.
it's easier.
Yes, and that's the
minorities.
difference. You think
Therefore, it's
disparities
not-
are all the
It's
result
not
of
racist
discrimination,
if
and they're
it's
not.
disproportionately affecting black people.
It does not mean that it is the
It
result
is
of
not.
intentional
You are
racism.
saying that it is. You are saying that
the
it is
result of a
not
Supreme
racist.
Court decision that's
No,
affected
Adam,
all
Adam, hold on a second. We got to wrap up because we got another show at 8 and everything. But just really quickly, because I heard you bring up 2 things. So are you saying that if more African Americans are in the prison system and that the courts might be disproportionately prosecuting folks that are in the African American community, that is not institutional racism, and the same with some of
That's
the housing
exactly
issues?
what I'm saying. That just
Even
because
though-
there's an overrepresentation
Here's
of
a
blacks
question.
in the prison does not mean that it is intentional racism. There's other
So what is
factors
it?
that go into it.
So what is it? If it's only affecting the black community in a detrimental way, what is it? Oh, you're froze. What is it? Say it
What
again. I'm sorry.
context are you saying? You saying schools?
If it's from schools to prisons to so on and so forth, if it's only detrimental and this system only affects black people, what is it?
Okay, number one, the educational system as set up by San Antonio School District versus Rodriguez, which property taxes determine funding, did not only affect blacks, it affected
We
poor
just
whites,
agreed.
but it
We
disproportionately
just literally-
disproportionately
Toby,
affected
let
black
him
people.
Okay. So now
Stop
if it disproportionately affects black people,
Jatobi, you've
Chad,
asked-
we're
doesn't mean
talking.
it's
You were just
racism.
off air, and
You're not
Adam and I were
talking,
having
you're just talking over
Adam and I
Adam.
were
Let
having a
Adam
great
respond.
conversation. Shaq,
Let
hold
Adam
on.
respond. And
Your
you're having a
assumption-
conversation doesn't mean that other people
Shaq,
can't join in. Let Adam respond to you. Stop trying to browbeat him because you've got a position. that
Adam,
you
now
want to
counselor,
espouse.
you said it's disproportionately affecting black people, and we can talk about the school system. We can talk about whatever. If the system is disproportionately affecting one race more so than any, what is it?
I get your argument. What I'm saying is that
Hi,
disparity,
Norway.
whether it's in the educational system or otherwise, that also affected whites, but did affect blacks disproportionately,
And men.
is not the result of racism. And I'll
But
tell
what
you,
is that system? If it's disproportionately affecting
Toby,
the black
let the man
people, what
express
is it?
his answer to you.
because
Instead of browbeating him,
No.
let him
Shaq, stop. We're
Don't
having
tell
a
me
good
to stop, but I'm
conversation.
telling you to stop.
Shaq, stop. You're
So the
wrong with
prison
everything
system.
before.
I will say that one of the
if
biggest
it's
factors resulting in disparity is single parent families. And I would
No,
refer you to the
yeah.
Moynihan report in the 60s that said single parent families. So my point is a philosophical difference. Disparity does not necessarily mean discrimination.
You just agreed that it is discriminating, it is disproportionately affecting black people.
Yes,
Now,
disproportionate impact
no,
doesn't
wait.
mean discrimination.
Wait,
Intentional discrimination.
Wait. It's disproportionately affecting black people. And you have said that. You've agreed to it
Put
multiple
that back
times.
on.
Correct.
You've agreed to it multiple times. That
Correct.
is disproportionately affecting black people. Yes,
Correct.
it
No,
affects
the
everybody
bearded
across the board,
six.
but it is disproportionately.
Is this the
affecting
bearded
one race.
monkey?
Can any of the rest
Now,
of us
if
join in
it
on this
is
conversation,
doing
or is
that,
it just a
That
Toby and
doesn't
Adam?
mean it's
Why-
racist per
I'm-
se.
No,
Can any of the rest
if
of us
it's
join
only
in here?
affecting one community
that
over
the
the other,
shaved,
is that
bearded
not
monkey?
a bad
No,
system?
it's not him. Can the rest of us
Because
join in on this
it is
conversation,
not a
or is
bad-
it just going to be dominated by Jatovi?
It's just me and Adam right now.
Phil,
We're having a
tell
good
me
one.
something.
It is. Okay, so
In
should
the
the rest of us
NBA,
just
the
go with
majority of
Jatovi?
players are African Americans. That means it's racist
Shaq,
against whites?
have a
Of course
drink.
not. There's
Oh,
disparities.
But
so
that's
it's
not the
not
system. That's not the system.
Can
Jack.
the
That's not the
rest of
system.
us?
So
Can the rest
basically,
of us jump
again,
in?
a
Can the
system
rest of
set
us
up
jump in?
that is
Jatovi.
disproportionately affecting one community more so
Jack,
than
You're
the
the
have a
other,
host.
drink.
Let somebody
more
else say
community
something.
than everybody else. Now, and this is where I mean, it is okay to say that system is racist or that system has racist elements to it.
I will
Hence
not.
the reason why Stop and Frisk was taken down, because Stop and Frisk was disproportionately affecting minorities more so than anybody.
Why so?
because they would stop and frisk minorities more so than any other group. And then on top of that,
Why would they do that?
they
Women
found
too.
because they
Women-
found the
women-
fact.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
They
no,
found
no.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
I'm right there
Hold on.
with you on that one.
But Shaquille actually brought this up sometime back in the
hell
evening.
yeah.
So, what is your thoughts around this stop and frisk thing? And
Oh,
we do
hell
need to
yeah.
wrap up in 30 minutes.
Well. Firstly, Kimberly, if I was able to stop and frisk women and I was a cop, I mean, absolutely I would. So I mean, come on, you gotta be realistic. But no, I just want to come to this thing about discrimination. Here's the thing that I'm fascinated about with the United States. If the United States really is as racist as it's purported to be, why is it that all these other races move to the United States and get success? And most notably, if the US is in fact racist against blacks, why is it then that Africans that migrate to America outperform African Americans that are born there? What's
correct.
the explanation for that? Is it that the Americans are racist only against African Americans? Because obviously skin color is not that issue. Look, there are a whole heap of issues that face your community and other minority communities around the world. Can I finish first? You talked over Adam. Can I have a go? Is that all right? If this really is an issue that affects people all over the world, we know it is. There are some severe issues that we know. For example, the things I always talk about: life without the possibility of parole for juveniles, something that the United States stands alone in the Western world. 90% of them are black. We know that children that are in adoption programs, if they're black, they're very unlikely to get, or they're much less likely to be adopted versus white kids, even when black families are doing the adoptions. Okay, there are some clear disparities. There are some clear instances where there's discrimination. That does not mean that every single instance where there's a disparity is because of discrimination. That's just not the case. And Jatovi, if you don't accept that, that's fine. But if Adam has a different opinion or I have a different opinion, you just browbeating us into it isn't going to convince us.
So you ready for my answer, or? So just to point out what you're talking about the histrionics between why those immigrants that come over from different countries with the same skin color have a tad bit better outcome. However, they still do run across the racism that's there. And the individuals that are here that have gone through the redlining and the marches and so on and so forth, which have the ingrained, and even they did studies, they called it PTSD in the African American community, dealing with a lot of the issues that go on. There still is, just because a minority comes from we'll say Morocco, moves here and has some success, that doesn't mean that racism isn't real. No, it is. There are already studies in terms of how job applications. If you have a minority sounding name, you are less likely to get the job. It is a fact.
that is false. The false science of implicit bias.
I've interviewed with most of the top 20 banks in the world, and my name certainly isn't white
Single parent families, 73%.
They have shown, no matter how much you laugh, I've got the facts and the statistics to pull it up. You can look it up. Go ahead and search on Google if you want to. But again, there's scholarly articles that are already written about this. So again, just to point out how Adam even pointed out the histrionics about the African American community dominating the population in the court system and in the jail system. You work in that legal field, so you have to agree that is there. And then we can also.
It's not due to racism.
But why? Because you have the over-policing of the African American communities. You also have the fact that African Americans minorities receive a higher punishment than actually the Caucasian individual who have that same crime. So therefore, you have that dominant population itself. You also have the 13th Amendment, which also throws a lot of people in jail and keeps them there in slavery. So therefore, there's a lot of things that tie it together. So just actually talking about, hey, well, it's not really. No, if a system is disproportionately affecting one race more so than the other, or one group of people more so than the other, there's a problem with that system.
No,
If you sit and say, well, I don't want to call it racist, well, call it a problem. Call it whatever you feel like to make your heart feel better. But what it is there is a problem. Hence the reason, as I said, stop and frisk was taken down because of the fact that it's disproportionate harm to the minority population.
Disproportionate impacts in various contexts are not due to institutionalized racism. In the criminal context, it is 73% of African American children
I
grow
know
up in
you don't want to say
families,
that it
which
is
is correlated to delinquency
Adam,
and to crime.
Adam,
And Daniel Patrick Moynihan said that in
I know you don't want to say that, but
because I don't believe it.
I get that you don't believe it, and you can say whatever term
does not mean
around
discrimination.
it. But the thing is, you agreed that it's disproportionately affecting one group over the other. It is disproportionately affecting one race over the other.
And the majority of nurses are female. The majority of bricklayers are male. The majority of basketball players are African American.
No matter how many times you try and bring in discrimination equivalence, no matter how many times you try and bring in a false equivalence, the fact of the matter is, it's false because you're talking about genetics.
No, because it doesn't fit the narrative.
And things, no, it's not a narrative. Because if
you have a different view to the one that Adam has, don't dismiss what he's saying.
If we are both under the same system, Shaq, you're not welcome in this conversation because it's me and Adam.
So I don't give a shit who you think it is. Right? There's 5 of us on here. There's 5 of us on here, mate. There's 5 of us on here, so I don't care what you think.
Just to point out the fact that we live up under the same system of rules, right? And those same system of rules affect one group over the other. That means that we should be able to balance that out. And that, regardless if you don't want to call it racist,
I do not
if you want to call it whatever, you have literally admitted multiple times that it is affecting the minority community disproportionately.
Let me come in. Adam, let me ask you a question here, right? I think
everybody wants to talk to Adam.
I'm going to take Toby's side for a moment, right? So I think there's a real problem with the fact that 90% of the juveniles that are sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, something I don't agree with at all under any circumstances, that they are 90% of them are black. I think that's a problem. Now, Toby's talking about all this discrimination that goes on based on the same rules. Wouldn't you agree that the NBA is racist? Because most of the fouls and most of the penalties...
That is a false equivalent. That is a false equivalent. No matter how many times you try it, it's a false equivalent. Just because your big body can't get out there and dribble doesn't mean that they don't like Australia.
Ridiculous.
And the majority of wide receivers in the NFL are African American. Is that because we're being racist?
Just because you decided to go into the law
players are better.
To go into
there's other non-discriminatory factors that have nothing to do with racism.
It has the NFL and that stuff doesn't have to do with races. You're trying to solve equivalence, but it doesn't work.
I got my buddies from the NFL. We got to be careful.
They're not the same.
I love my boys.
Yep, Peyton Manning was one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. But actually, if you want to talk about the racism,
most quarterbacks in the NFL are
white discrimination. I mean, come on.
Okay, Shaq, again, your big body couldn't get out there and dribble, so therefore it's racist.
It doesn't matter what you're talking about. You have no idea what my athletic abilities are or were.
Just to point out,
just because you have an opinion which disagrees with the opinion that Adam has or that I have doesn't mean you should just try and browbeat us.
Racism and the sexism that happens in the NFL.
Single-parent families are the biggest predictor of crime, not institutionalized racism. By the way,
3000's Flute album is actually pretty good. But just to point out the fact that if you want to talk about the racism that's within the NFL, you have to look at the actual amount of black coaches within the NFL.
Oh, that's where the problem is. That's where the problem is
in the NFL.
Let's don't talk about the racism. Let's talk about the sexism within
that as well. I am so.
Why are there no? Why are there no females in the NFL?
I am so.
90% of violent felons in the prison system is sexist against men.
There have been more and more.
They signed my chessboard.
There have been more female athletes participating. in being umpires and referees and their
NFL.
coaches.
Jacoby, you just
Like
don't
San
like
Francisco has
disparities that have nothing to do with discrimination because NFL nursing populations, are we sexist against men who are
Big
hiring nurses?
difference. You're making false equivalences, and you know
Okay,
this.
well, let's-
Counselor.
No, I'm pointing out that
let's-
disparity is not
let's-
Counselor,
let's-
you
let's-
know
let's-
that's a
let's-
false equivalence, and you know that.
Jacoby, let's talk about these false equivalences. You said on a previous show, you said that Thomas, like you were talking about black.
I said a whole bunch of stuff in the previous show. Now you're gonna go to Thomas Sowell, a person that I disagree with. I don't consider him
Can you
racist.
be quiet for a moment? Is that all right? Or you'll just leave the room either way.
I've got to
made
take
mention
somebody
of-
to the bathroom because you're wandering down. You're crying that you can't play basketball, so you can sit. You're saying
I'm
that
not crying,
it's
I can't
racist
play
against
basketball.
Australians.
You
That's
think
ridiculous.
with a name like Shaquille, I wasn't forced by everybody in
Oh.
high school and primary school to play basketball? I got a couple of skills, let me tell you. Anyway,
Can you play?
while he's left, so we can actually all get a word in, he brought up about black conservatives. Okay. And one of the people he mentioned as being totally wrong was Thomas Sowell, whose book just happens to be right here on my desk and very relevant. And he talks about all these different things wrong with Thomas Sowell. So I asked him, what university is Thomas Sowell currently attached to?
Stanford.
He doesn't know. I asked him, I know you know, but he doesn't know. I then asked him, name for me a book that Thomas Sowell has written that you've read. He doesn't know. Okay. So then I brought out this book and I said, I highly recommend that you read it, Discrimination and Disparities by Thomas Sowell. Okay. And I really hope that I get to meet the man because he's getting a lot older. And my cousin actually works at Stanford. Thomas Sowell in this book talks about where there has been discrimination, where there is just simply disparities. And you bring that up and you say, look, not every single thing where there's a disparity is because of racism. I've also made mention of the fact, and look, there you are, Adam, you've worked at universities and colleges for a long time. You may not be aware of this statistic, but firstborn children are substantially more likely to go to college or university than secondborn, who are more likely than thirdborn, who are more likely than fourthborn. And if you're the fifthborn child, you're like 15 to 20% the chance as the firstborn child. Is there a vast conspiracy against fifth-born children in the United States? Of course not. It would be silly to think that, for the same reason that in today's society, where people interact with each other without really caring too much what they look like, they just interact with each other and take people how they come, that you think that every disparity against people of color is because of active discrimination. It's just not the case. And the truth of the matter is on that, if it were true, those first immigrants that come over to the United States would ring back their families and say, I've made such a mistake. Don't come here. This is terrible. Okay? This is the most racist, terrific, horrible place you can come to. Don't come. Okay? But that's not what happens. Most immigrants that move to America try very hard to use all the different programs that they can to get their families to come over. They're not going to do that if America is so horrible.
Yeah,
That's because they get all my Social Security.
I cannot believe.
Shaq never bought this book, and
No.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. It's not available. It wasn't available to
Shaquille,
me.
hold on a second.
But I
Shaquille,
cannot-
hold on a second. Shaquille, hold on a second.
Let me just-
Wade
just for a second.
Johnson,
Shaquille.
the
Shaquille, hold on a second.
Please,
Shaquille.
Shaquille,
Shaquille, hold on a second.
No,
Because one thing I was gonna-
Mark, please just let me finish my sentence. I cannot believe every time I come to the United States, I cannot believe that I have to
I'll give you a
continually
break.
try to convince Americans that America is a great country. What are you guys doing over there? Why
I'm
do
going
you
to
want to hate
Colombia.
yourselves and your history and your country so bloody much?
I'm
You're a
going to
great
Colombia.
country. Stop
Medical
it.
care is
But
cheaper, air is fresher, food
Shaquille,
is
hold on a second.
healthier. I'm
Kim,
going to Colombia.
No, and I've got some other friends that talking about going to Colombia as well, and somebody talking
I
about
love
going
it
to Costa Rica
there.
and
Oh
everything.
my
But one of the
God.
things that I've heard
They're
that, to your point, Shaquille, is there was a recent study, it was actually done in
I ain't gonna
September,
say
that actually
anything
brought
else.
up the notion that a lot of African Americans are concerned that there is not enough representation, because I do sometimes think that you don't always agree that representation matters, that they are concerned that there is a broad concern about how they meaning African Americans, are depicted in the news media, with the majority saying that they see racist and negative depictions and a lack of efforts to cover the broader segment, which I try to do on the shows that I'm part of here on Pod TV, and which I think a lot of people try to do, because a lot of times the things that are positive in the community, I mean, I'll give you an example. My brother just did a event where he was giving food to the folks in a certain neighborhood and provided the food for their Thanksgiving meals. I helped him write the press release and everything. Do you think we got any coverage about that? Because it wasn't blood and guts to Kim's favorite sort and everything, because a lot of times there is an attempt to always cover the negative aspects of things and everything.
Mark,
and there is...
Mark, I agree with you, actually. I do agree with you. But again, I wouldn't say that's a race issue. Because how many times do you see a great story about, you know, some white girl at a white church feeding the homeless? You don't see that very much. But I agree with you. There is oftentimes a very negative depiction of people of color and black people in the United States. But what's our solution? What's the media done? They've done some of the most ridiculous things that you look at and go, oh, gee, that helped, didn't it? For example, they have started to capitalize the word black, but not capitalize the word white. Really? Really? I mean, that's something
that's a whole other discussion, because the evolution of the word from Negro on to African American.
Let me respond. Let me respond. The second thing is that if there is a black offender, they won't tell you the skin color, but when it's a white offender, they will. And case in point was, you read out an article, I can't remember what the article was. You read out an article on one of the shows 6 months ago, 12 months ago, something like that. And I said to you on air, I said, look, obviously that person must be black or a person of color, probably black. And you said, what makes you think that? I said, because if it was a white person, they would have said so. Okay? That's how obvious it is to us. We're on the other side of the world. And when we looked it up, that was correct. The third example of this sort of bias.
Where is this example, by the way? I want to see this example.
No, Jacoby, I'm talking to Mark. You're not.
I know you're talking to Mark, but you're
not welcome in this conversation. I'm speaking to Mark.
Okay, so you're making up more stuff. Please show the example. I want the example. I want the example.
Mark,
if you can't provide the example, then you just made it up.
Yeah, okay, I'm making it up. But Mark nodded along because he knows what I'm talking about, but I'm obviously making it up. Mark, the third thing is, there was an incident that occurred where 4 or 5, I can't quite remember, police officers attacked a man, and I'm not sure, did he die? I can't remember. But in the depiction of this, when we looked at it, all of those police officers were black, all of them, right? Mm-hmm. And then I said, well, is that, I just asked you, I said, is that racist then? Or is it not racist because the police officers were black? And you didn't really want to answer me. You couldn't quite answer the question for me as to what you felt about it. Then you said to me, well, I think, it might depend on who's in charge of the police service, because it might be systemic racism. I said, well, the person who's in charge of the police service is most likely black, probably either a woman or something part of the LGBTQ community. And you're like, no. Like, what makes you think that? I said, what? You think it's a white man in charge of a police service in America? Come on now, right? So we looked it up, and what was it? It was a black woman who was in charge. You still wouldn't say that it wasn't racist. Then,
can we get more concrete evidence of this? I want to know. I want to know the story. I want to look it up. I want to be educated on that story.
Toby, I'm directing something directly at Mark. Then a couple of days later, progressive Democrats came out and said, well, yes, okay, just because the police chief is black and everybody involved was black, it is still racist because of the systemic racism inherent within police services generally, and that's just been passed down, right? And then although you hesitate,
that's part of the argument around Black Lives. Hold on a second. I was listening to your example, and I kind of remember the example. That's really what my post look was and everything, because I don't remember specifically I'm not saying that that didn't happen. I'm just saying I don't remember the specific incident. But hold on a second, Shaquille.
I'm right at the end of my comment. Just let me finish my sentence. Okay. You then said to me that this is indicative of systemic racism. So my question to you, and I don't want to put words in Adam's mouth, but I think it's a similar sentiment to what he is saying, is at what point is it not racist, but it's just a disparity? At what point is it,
Right.
hey, look, some things happen to people in the community. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes things have even happened.
Just happens to be always black people that it goes wrong against.
The other, but it wasn't actually racism that caused it.
It's not always black people. Why are the majority?
You said there was a disparity, so yeah.
There's a disparity in Southern Indiana. The majority of people who are arrested for drug use are white. You want to know why? Because the whites are doing the meth.
I've said several times on the show that there are things that are incidences that are around class, and I've even brought up class, and around cultural environments and everything. I know I've said that I've got family members that have dealt with the meth epidemic, and no, they are not African American. They've come in more of the native side and everything. So yes, there are things that are choices that are made and all of that. But I cannot say that there aren't incidences where race and race don't play a part, including in leadership and everything. So yes, there are things that take place, including I said I've got cousins and everything that are black police officers.
Mark, you're answering the opposite of what I asked you. I didn't ask you where there's incidents of racism. I asked you, and I've asked you this before in other shows. Tell me, what instances are there where people? Let's go with black people. Tell me, are there any instances where black people have been worse off because of something, but that something wasn't caused by racism? It was just something that happened?
Yes.
I didn't ask you to tell me.
Didn't I just say meth? Didn't I just say the meth example? I gave you the meth example. I just gave you the meth example. That was not
police officers. In the minuscule percentage of cases in which force is used, why is it that black police officers use it equal to or more against African Americans than whites?
More,
because disparity does not equal discrimination. And I quote Thomas.
We've already established, counselor, that the disparity that we're talking about affects the minority community more. Therefore, it being a black officer, white officer, Oriental officer, whomever, if that system is affecting the community more, it doesn't matter who's in that system. It's the system that's broken, not the actual people.
I respect your opinion.
I'm going to
if we put all the positions of power, if we made all of them black and the issue still existed, that would mean that it's just systemic racism. The overhang of white people.
You're not listening, Shaq. You're not listening.
I'm asking you a question.
The system is set up.
I'm going to add something here where we talk about all of this prejudice and everything.
I love Italians.
Yeah, I do too. So you know what is? I love Italian food, but
I love Italians
attitude. But so anyway, what bothers me most is when we go to war. When we go to war, our people who serve us, our heroes, their equipment is less than what our enemies have. Our enemies invest more money in the military equipment, the weapons, the guns, even the phones. Our men didn't even have communications near what the enemies have. That's what bothers me. So if you want to talk about all this stuff, that's fine. That's community. But at the end of the day, what we need to also focus on is what protects us. And our heroes, our soldiers, men, women, go into battle nowhere near equipped than what the enemy is.
So
and that's what concerns me.
That the US should actually increase two things. One, the US should increase its military expenditure, and two, the US should stop giving away all of its stuff to countries like Afghanistan.
So, like the protective plates for the vehicles when they drive through mines, that was cut during Trump. There are a lot of things that shouldn't be cut, because these men and women risk their lives for us. I don't believe in war, but I do believe in defense. Just like I took down a bully once, right? You have to be able to defend yourself. And in our country, one of the things that hurts me most, and I used to work with one of the Homeland Security directors who reported to the president, and this was a concern of his as well. are given, the technology, the weapons is nowhere near the sophistication. I mean, some of our guys actually in law enforcement have to buy their own bullets, and guess what? They shoot crooked. They don't shoot straight.
The one viewer that we still have watching us right now would like to hear from Adam. So hello from Norway, Adam.
Of course, they love Adam.
Well, I love Norway, so we're thrilled that you're here.
There you go, Adam.
I think what we've seen here is a respectful debate and a fundamental philosophical agreement. I think
all women love Adam. I just want to say this happens
the women
every
love Adam.
show we do. Whenever I go look at the hits after the show, it's all women. So
Big pimping.
we need to keep doing these shows.
Popularity. He'll be going to Hollywood very shortly.
That's why you and I are still single.
Jacoby's sister may help him get the job there.
Nothing afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, look, great discussion. What I would say is diversity can be a wonderful thing, but can also be harmful. We have to stop looking beyond. We have to look beyond our identities to individuals. And number two, okay, not everything that results in disparity is the result of racism or discrimination. There are other factors that need to be addressed if we're going to have the true kind of equality in a society that aspires to.
The only thing I would add to that is definitely I can see that there are other things that I've even brought up, meth, and there are other things that I've brought up as well. There are things that are part of the disparity conversation. Shaquille, you can disagree with me, but as one that is in the media and everything, I would say that there are some injustices that are happening in the media and the ways that people are getting into media lanes that can still be addressed. It was being addressed in the 80s and 90s, and I personally think that it still needs to be addressed in terms of some equalities, particularly in some of our major networks and all along those lines. Like I said, you can disagree with me, but that's just my opinion. Let
me just say something. We didn't have time to bring it up on the show
3
today.
hours.
There is, we're on 3 hours. So I'll make
3 hour tour. You know what happened to the 3 hour tour, right?
I'll make this very quick.
I would love to be on the island.
We didn't have time to bring it up on this show, but when I did intend to bring it up earlier, and I actually had said I really hope Jacoby's on for it, but we haven't had time to address it, so hopefully we can address it.
I'm Mary Ann.
What has been released in the last handful of days that I'm aware of is a documentary called, I believe it's called The Decline of Minnesota, and it deals with George Floyd's death. Now, from the look of the trailers so far, it's basically implying that the police officers themselves didn't do very much wrong and it wasn't racist. Now, that's going to be a very controversial view. To be fair, I haven't watched it yet. It apparently is available for free on Rumble and on YouTube. I will aim to watch it. But I do want to just say that from some of the snippets of the interviews I saw with the police, this was some of what I was talking about at the time when it was a very inflamed issue or inflammatory issue for you guys in America.
Yeah.
I used to work for the police department as a trainer. I was a contractor as a trainer for police departments in Australia and corrections and other organizations. I know some of the techniques that they use. This is one of the reasons why I have been very critical of policing in general.
Bye.
That they use, of the way that they interact with people. Been very, very critical. And when the George Floyd incident occurred, I said, look, let's everyone just calm down a minute and let's look at the real issue. Is this the act of one racist officer, or is this the act of or something to do with bad policing? Okay. And I kept bringing that up and saying, look, some of these techniques are used and maybe they shouldn't be, etc. But because the US got so hung up on it just being a white officer who was on the neck or the shoulder, depending on whose version you're listening to, the neck or the shoulder of George Floyd, who was black, okay, and George Floyd died, it must have been one racist officer. I think it is a bigger reflection of policing in general. And I said, we need to look at how we're going to solve these issues. Defunding the police isn't the way to solve the issues. If you're married to somebody, you don't say, hey, look, we don't agree on something, so I'm going to divorce you one day after you get married. You try to work out the issues. So, I think this will be a very interesting documentary to watch. I think that whether we talk about tomorrow or maybe next week when everybody's had a chance to watch it, let's watch it, let's discuss it, because I've seen it. Predicting this is going to become a big media story again over the next week or two. Adam, over to you.
Watch the documentary. How's the documentary portrayed? I've not seen it.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm talking.
Well, Adam said he saw it.
Yeah.
Well, you've
I
seen
just-
it.
I've seen the documentary. I mean, this is a very controversial topic. Basically, what they're saying is that the public narrative that was presented is not consistent with some of the facts relating to the medical examiner's report and some of the actions that had taken place. I mean, that's a whole nother show, but it does raise questions about whether the way that the media presented this to the public was fully accurate and gave an accurate representation of not only what happened but what the cause of death was. But again, that's not.
Can I propose?
I mean,
that we
just to point-
all
just-
watch it, and we actually have a specific show just on this. Can I propose?
Yes.
That? Would agree with that? Because
Yes.
think that would really
No, I
great.
think that would be a great idea. And just for you to tell me, we do need to end this show because we got the other show going on and everything. But just to say really quickly, I would argue that there are some things that the police do that I don't necessarily agree with, but I understand why they do it. I said that I've got a cousin that is a GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation officer, and when he explained to me the reason that they will not that they will shoot a certain way because they are afraid that if they shoot, because people will say, just shoot and decapitate them on the knee and everything, but they are afraid of the adrenaline. That's why they oftentimes shoot at the larger mass and they may wind up killing the person. That's what my cousin brought to my attention and everything. And the other thing that I was going to say, and then I'm going to end because I got to get to that other show and everything, is that it is a very good conversation we can have just around policing in general, because even though a very famous case here in this area, there were some questions around the way that the DA handled things, whether you believe that Mr. Peterson was guilty or whether you buy the bat theory or not. And he was part of that whole staircase movie and everything. There were some things that were done in terms of the handling of the case that were very unfair. And I think even Jacoby, who lives here in Durham with me, would agree that they did some bad things in that case, whether you think that Mr. Peterson is guilty or not.
Oh, he's guilty.
Yeah, I know. I actually know the lawyer who was there for who actually talked about the bird of prey. I know that lawyer that was in that situation.
The bat theory.
Yeah, the bird of prey, whatever that theory. No, it was a bird of the owl. The
owl. I said bat. It was an owl. You're right. It's an owl.
So I know that guy.
Did he take the Alfred plea? Did he take the Alfred plea?
Yeah, that owl theory. I sat with that lawyer for a while. He was crazy. But
crazy.
Just to point out, also another documentary that would be good for everybody to watch is the documentary The 13th. It's actually a really good one that talks about the 13th Amendment and how they utilize that to keep individuals. It's the new version of slavery, which is what they're talking about keeping people incarcerated and stuff like that. So watch The 13th. That's another one. And in terms of diversity, making things great. Just to point out, Adam, and since we are at Thanksgiving, or what the Native American population is trying to push is Thoughtsgiving, to actually start an education process around that. But just to think about it, Best Macaroni and Cheese has more than one cheese in there.
Oh.
So diversity makes things better.
And the pizza is in North Jersey, and that's it.
Oh, we'll give you that one, Jacoby.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys.
I get happy Thanksgiving.
I want to take some credit after Travis's comments yesterday about Australians being alcoholics. This is the first time I've drunk on air, and I have managed to get one of the co-founders of the network to have a glass of red wine with me. So cheers, Kim. I hope our audience enjoyed this show. And I think it was the dream. Yes, I am British, but I grew up in Australia. So
and Shaq, here's to us drinking in person.
And we have two people. We have the person from Norway, Polar Nights, but we've also got apparently the Dream 706, whoever that might be, and everything. So there have been two people that have chimed in on Twitch, commenting and everything. So we do have folks that are watching on Twitch.
We got Twitch people.
They're right. The Dream
over 2.5 million viewers now. Thank you.
Well, I was just saying the Dream is right in what he said right here.
But the issue is, where did they join? Because surely they didn't join us 3 hours ago. They must have logged in and just gone, those guys are still going. I thought I missed the show. Let's join in and see what
it's called Drink Binging. Drink Binging. Drink.
Y'all sound like y'all about to start another hour, so I'm gonna go get me some food. I'm gonna see y'all.
Love you.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys. Thank you.
Yep.
Love you.
Everybody's got to go because I got to go to the Urban Sentinel, and then I'm going to go home and get me some food.